It begins with a question, whispered in a moment of quiet desperation. Picture this. You are sitting in your car, trapped in a river of steel and glass that refuses to flow. The symphony of the city is a cacophony of impatient horns, of distant sirens, of the relentless thrum of a world that never sleeps. The neon signs outside blur into a meaningless wash of color through the rain-streaked windshield. Your phone, lying on the seat beside you, pulses with a silent, insistent light. Another email, another notification, another demand on your time, your energy, your attention. You feel a familiar tightness in your chest, a sense of being stretched thin, of running a race you don't remember starting. And in the stillness of your sealed car, surrounded by the chaos of a million other lives, the question rises from a place deep within. Why me? Why is this so hard? It isn't a question seeking a complex philosophical answer, not at that moment. It is the simple, raw cry of an exhausted soul. This feeling, this low-grade fever of the spirit, has become the background noise of modern life. We are the architects of a world that promises connection at the speed of light, yet we feel profoundly disconnected. We are told that happiness lies in the next achievement, the next purchase, the next promotion. But with every goal we reach, the finish line seems to move further away. We run on an invisible hamster wheel, fueled by anxiety and the fear of being left behind, growing more and more tired with every step. We chase fleeting pleasures and numb our discontent, all while that quiet question, that feeling of being stuck, continues to echo in the background. We have built a world of external wonders, but we have neglected the inner landscape, leaving it untended, overgrown with the weeds of stress, worry, and a quiet, gnawing sense of meaninglessness. But what if the answer wasn't out there? What if the solution to our inner turmoil wasn't another app, another vacation, another distraction? What if there existed an ancient path, a different way of seeing, that didn't promise an escape from life, but offered a way to find peace right in the middle of it? This is not a call to embrace a new religion or to believe in a dogma. It is an invitation to explore a science of the mind, a practical, time-tested set of tools for understanding and transforming your own experience. For 2.5 millennia, the wisdom of the Buddhist tradition has offered a profound diagnosis of the human condition and a clear, compassionate, and achievable path to healing. It begins not with a demand for faith, but with a simple request: to turn your attention inward, to look closely, with kindness and curiosity, at the nature of your own mind. The journey to answer the question, why me, begins here, by learning to see the world and yourself not as you wish them to be, but as they truly are. To begin this journey, we must first look squarely at the nature of the problem. In the language of the Buddha, the central human challenge is captured in a single, profound word: dukkha. This word is often translated into English as suffering, but this translation, while not entirely wrong, is deeply incomplete. It can conjure images of dramatic tragedy, of intense pain and anguish, and while dukkha certainly includes these things, its meaning is far broader, more subtle, and much more pervasive. To truly understand it is to understand the very texture of our existence. Think of it less as a gaping wound, and more as a constant, low-level ache. It is the feeling of a shoe that is just a little too tight. It is the faint, dissonant hum of a string that is slightly out of tune. It is the subtle wobble of a wheel that is not perfectly round. It is the persistent underlying sense that things are somehow off, not quite right, fundamentally unsatisfactory. This is dukkha. It is not a judgment that life is bad, but a clear-eyed, compassionate diagnosis of a condition we all share. To see it clearly is not to become a pessimist, but to become a realist, for only by seeing the starting point of our journey can we ever hope to navigate the path ahead. The Buddha spoke of dukkha in 3 distinct, yet interwoven, layers. The first is the most obvious, the one we all know intimately. It is called dukkha, the suffering of suffering. This is the raw pain of life. It is the physical pain of a headache, of a chronic illness, of an injury. It is the searing emotional pain of losing someone you love, the sting of betrayal, the anxiety that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning. It is the frustration of being stuck in traffic when you are already late, the despair of seeing your plans fall apart, the hollow loneliness that can visit even in a crowded room. This form of dukkha needs little explanation, for it is the common currency of human experience. It is the sharp, undeniable pain that makes us cry out, that makes us ask that first desperate question, why me? It is real, it is valid, and the Buddhist path does not for a moment deny its existence or its power. It fully acknowledges the tears, the grief, and the struggle as an undeniable part of our shared humanity. The second layer, however, is more subtle and perhaps more profound. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. This is the ache that is woven into our happiest moments. Think of a perfect golden sunset. It is beautiful, breathtaking, but a part of our mind knows that in a few moments, the colors will fade and the darkness will arrive. That subtle knowledge, that awareness of its ending, tinges the beauty with a hint of melancholy. This is viparinama dukkha. It is the joy of holding your newborn child, knowing that this tiny, dependent being will one day grow up and walk their own path. It is the peak of a passionate romance, knowing that this intense fire will inevitably mellow into a different, perhaps quieter, form of love. It is the satisfaction of a great success, knowing that this moment at the top is, by its very nature, temporary. We expend so much energy trying to grasp onto pleasant experiences, to make them permanent, to build a fortress around our happiness. But life is a river, not a monument. Everything flows, everything changes. Our resistance to this fundamental truth, our desperate clinging to what is pleasant, and our fearful aversion to what is unpleasant, is itself a deep source of dukkha. The very happiness that we cherish contains the seed of its own passing, and therefore the seed of our potential suffering when it does. The problem isn't the change itself, but our attachment to things as they are, our inability to let go with grace. The third and most subtle layer is sankhara dukkha, the suffering of conditioned existence. This is the most pervasive and perhaps the most difficult to grasp, for it is the very background radiation of our lives. It is a fundamental unsatisfactoriness that is woven into the fabric of being a self in a transient, interdependent world. It is that sense of unease that can persist even when nothing is overtly wrong. You have your health, your family is safe, your job is secure, yet there remains a subtle hum of anxiety, a feeling that this fragile piece could shatter at any moment. This is sankhara dukkha. It arises from the fact that we are conditioned beings, a complex assembly of physical and mental components that are constantly in flux. Our bodies, our thoughts, our emotions, our perceptions, they are all dependent on a million causes and conditions over which we have very little control. This inherent instability, this fundamental unreliability of life itself, creates a deep-seated insecurity. It is the feeling of being a house built on shifting sands. This is the ultimate, universal answer to why me, because you are a conditioned being, because this is the nature of this form of existence. It is not a personal failing, it is not a punishment, it is simply the way things are. There is a story that illustrates this journey from personal grief to universal understanding with heartbreaking beauty. It is the story of Kisa Gautami. She was a young woman who had a son, and she loved him more than life itself. But one day, the child fell ill and died. Kisa Gautami was consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness. She refused to accept that her son was gone. Clutching his small, lifeless body, she went from house to house, from person to person, begging for a medicine that could bring him back. Some turned away from her in pity. Others thought she had lost her mind. Finally, a wise man saw her desperation and, instead of dismissing her, offered a sliver of hope. He told her he couldn't give her the medicine himself, but she should go to the Buddha. Kisa Gautami ran to the Buddha, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded for the miracle medicine. The Buddha looked at her with infinite compassion and said, "There is only one thing you need to find. Go into the village and bring me back a single mustard seed. But," he added, "it must come from a house where no one has ever died." Hope surged in her heart. A single mustard seed, that was all. It seemed so simple. She went to the first house and knocked on the door. "The Buddha has sent me," she said. "I need a mustard seed to cure my son. But it must be from a house that has never known death." The woman of the house looked at her sadly. "You can have as many mustard seeds as you want," she replied. "But in this house, we have known death. My father died here last year, Kisagotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. My husband died here. I lost my sister. Our first child was taken from us. Every door she knocked on, every person she spoke to, had a story of loss. The living were few, but the dead were many. As the sun began to set, the truth began to dawn on Kisagotami, not as a harsh intellectual concept, but as a deep, visceral understanding. Her grief, which had felt so intensely personal, so isolating, was not hers alone. It was the shared inheritance of all humanity. The pain she felt was the same pain that resided behind every door in the village. In that moment, her frantic, grasping search for a cure for her own pain transformed. She was no longer just a mother grieving her son. She was a human being awakening to the nature of life and death. She took her child to the charnel ground, let him go, and returned to the Buddha, not with a mustard seed, but with a quiet, transformed heart. The Buddha asked, "Did you bring the mustard seed?" She replied, "The work of the mustard seed is done. Let me take refuge in you." She understood. She saw that dukkha, in its many forms, is not a punishment inflicted upon a few unlucky souls. It is the very ground upon which we all walk. Seeing this is the first noble truth. It is the brave act of looking at life without delusion. It is not meant to be a source of despair, but the very opposite. It is the essential first step toward freedom. A doctor cannot treat a patient who refuses to acknowledge their illness. In the same way, we cannot begin to heal our own hearts until we have the courage to see the nature of dukkha clearly. By understanding this universal ache, we move from the isolating cry of "why me?" to the compassionate, connecting whisper of "us too." And this is where the path truly begins. For if this is the universal condition, this fundamental unsatisfactoriness, the next crucial question must be asked: where does it come from? What is the engine that drives this constant, subtle suffering? We have looked with courage at the universal condition of dukkha, that subtle and persistent ache of dissatisfaction that runs through our lives. To acknowledge this condition is not an act of surrender, but the first step toward genuine freedom. It is the honest diagnosis. Now, we must proceed as any wise physician would and ask the next critical question: what is the cause? If dukkha is the symptom, what is the root of the disease? The Buddha's answer to this is captured in another single vital word, tanha, translated as craving, or, perhaps more poetically, as thirst. Tanha is the relentless, agitated, and deeply ingrained habit of the mind that drives us toward what we find pleasant and away from what we find unpleasant. It is the inner engine of our restlessness. It is the unquenchable thirst that promises satisfaction with the next sip, but only ever leaves us thirstier than before. It is the force that takes a simple, neutral experience and weaponizes it, turning it into a source of attachment and, ultimately, a source of suffering. This thirst is not a monolithic force. It manifests in three distinct ways, each one a powerful current that pulls at our hearts and minds, keeping us bound to the wheel of dissatisfaction. The first and most familiar form is kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasures. This is the craving for things that delight our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. In the ancient world, this might have been the craving for rich foods or fine silks. In our modern world, this form of tanha has been amplified into a global industry. It is the engine of consumerism and the lifeblood of social media. It is the itch to check your phone for a new notification, the dopamine hit of a like on your photo. It is the obsessive desire for the newest gadget, the latest fashion, the more luxurious car. It is the craving that arises when you see an advertisement for a sugary drink or a decadent dessert. It is the longing to lose yourself in the next episode of a series, to numb the quiet anxieties of the day with a stream of digital entertainment. The objects of our desire are endless, and the satisfaction they provide is always fleeting. The pleasure of a delicious meal lasts only as long as the taste is on our tongue. The novelty of a new phone wears off in a matter of weeks. Each time the pleasure fades, the thirst returns, demanding its next fix. We become like a person drinking salt water to quench their thirst. The more we drink, the more desperately thirsty we become. This is not to say that pleasure itself is wrong. The path is not one of grim asceticism. The problem lies in the clinging, the desperate belief that these fleeting external things can provide a lasting, stable happiness. They cannot. They are like beautiful soap bubbles, shimmering for a moment before they inevitably pop, leaving us with nothing but a renewed sense of lack. The second form of this thirst is more subtle, but equally powerful. It is bhavatana, the thirst for existence, for becoming. This is the deep, primal drive of the ego to solidify itself, to continue, to be somebody. It is the craving not just to have things, but to be something more. It is the engine of ambition, the relentless pursuit of fame, power, reputation, and identity. It is the desire to build a legacy, to carve our name into the stone of history so that we might not be forgotten. This thirst fuels our constant projects of self-improvement, the desire to become a better version of ourselves, more successful, more attractive, more intelligent, more respected. Even on a spiritual path, this thirst can manifest as the desire to become enlightened, to achieve a special state, to be recognized as a wise or holy person. Bhavatanya is the mind's desperate attempt to create a solid and permanent sense of self in a world that is fundamentally fluid and impermanent. We construct an identity out of our job titles, our relationships, our accomplishments, our beliefs, and we cling to this construction as if it were our very life. But because all of these things are subject to change, our sense of self is built on unstable ground. When we lose a job, or a relationship ends, or we fail to meet our own expectations, our constructed identity shatters, and the result is immense suffering. This thirst for becoming is the root of our anxiety about the future and our obsession with controlling our own narrative. It is a deep resistance to simply being as we are, right now. The third form is the dark twin of the second. It is vibhava tanha, the thirst for non-existence, for annihilation. If the first two forms of tanha are about grasping and pulling things toward us, this one is about pushing things away. It is the fierce, desperate craving for an unpleasant experience to end. It is the desire to annihilate a painful feeling, a shameful memory, a difficult situation, or even the self that is experiencing them. This is the energy behind avoidance and suppression. When we feel the sting of criticism, vibhavatana is the urge to lash out in anger or retreat into sullen silence. When we are overwhelmed by stress, it is the craving to numb our minds with alcohol, drugs, or mindless distraction. It is the desire for the loud noise to stop, for the difficult person to go away, for the feeling of anxiety in our chest to simply cease to exist. In its most extreme form, this thirst for annihilation can manifest as self-harm or suicidal ideation, the ultimate desire to extinguish the self to escape its pain. It is a profound misunderstanding. It believes that happiness can be found by destroying what is unpleasant, just as bhavatana believes it can be found by accumulating what is pleasant. Both are forms of struggle, of violence against the present moment. Both are a refusal to accept reality as it is, and both lead inevitably to dukkha. To understand the nature of tanha, Buddhist cosmology offers a powerful and haunting image: the hungry ghost, or preta. Imagine a being with a grotesquely swollen, empty belly, representing a vast, insatiable hunger. Yet, its neck is as thin as a needle, and its mouth is no bigger than a pinhole. It is surrounded by food and water, but it can never consume enough to ease the gnawing emptiness in its stomach. Every drop of water it manages to swallow turns to fire and acid, burning it from the inside. This is not a literal monster to be feared in the external world. It is a perfect metaphor for a state of mind, a state we all inhabit whenever we are in the grip of tanha. The hungry ghost is the frantic scrolling through a social media feed, consuming images and information, but feeling ever more empty and disconnected. It is the endless chase for the next promotion, the next possession, the next relationship, believing this one will finally be the one to fill the void, only to find the hunger returns. It is the state of chronic dissatisfaction, of being perpetually on the search for something more, unable to rest in the peace of what is already here. We are the hungry ghost every time we believe that our happiness is located somewhere outside of ourselves, in a future moment that never quite arrives. It is crucial to understand that the target here is not desire itself. Desire is a natural human energy. The desire for food when you are hungry, the desire for companionship, the desire to learn and grow, even the desire for liberation, these are not the problem. The problem is the process that follows. The thirst turns into clinging, into attachment, into a desperate grasping known as upadana. It is the difference between enjoying the warmth of a fire and grabbing onto the hot coals. It is the difference between appreciating a beautiful piece of music and being thrown into despair when it ends. Tanha is the reflexive, blind thirst. Upadana is the conscious or unconscious decision to hold on, to make our well-being dependent on that external object or experience. And so, we arrive at the second noble truth. The cause of our universal ache, dukkha, is this relentless burning thirst, tanha. It is this inner motor of grasping and rejecting, of pulling and pushing, that keeps the wheel of dissatisfaction turning, moment after moment. It is the restless heart that can find no peace. But in this diagnosis, there is no cause for despair. There is, in fact, tremendous hope. If our suffering were caused by a random, malevolent universe, or by an unchangeable flaw in our own being, we would be truly lost, but it is not. It is caused by a specific, identifiable, and understandable mental process. And if it has a cause, it can have a cessation. If a fire is burning because it is being fed fuel, then the fire can be put out by simply ceasing to add more fuel. A new question, full of profound possibility, can now be asked. If this burning thirst is the cause of our suffering, can this thirst be quenched? Is it possible to find an end to this cycle of craving and dissatisfaction? We have walked together into the heart of the human condition, looking directly at the universal reality of dukkha, the pervasive ache of dissatisfaction. We have then faced its cause, the relentless, burning thirst of tanha, the engine of craving that keeps us chained to a cycle of wanting and disappointment. To remain here, with only the diagnosis and its cause, would be a journey into despair. But the teaching of the Buddha is not a philosophy of pessimism. It is a path of profound, realistic optimism. It is here, at this crucial juncture, that we encounter the third great truth, the truth that changes everything. It is the truth of nirodha, the truth of cessation. This is the good news. This is the promise that the fire of suffering can be extinguished, that the thirst can be quenched, and that a state of profound peace and freedom is not a distant dream, but an attainable reality for every one of us. The word nirodha, like dukkha, carries subtleties that are easily lost in translation. It means cessation, extinction, ending. To the Western ear, these words can sound negative, even frightening, suggesting a bleak annihilation or a void of nothingness. But this is a profound misunderstanding. We must ask, what exactly is it that ceases? What is extinguished? The teaching is not that you are extinguished. It is the fever of craving that is extinguished. It is the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion that are put out. And what remains when a fire dies down? Not a black hole of nothingness, but a cool, calm, and clear space. What remains when a fever breaks? Not the absence of life, but the return of natural, vibrant health. This is nirodha. It is the end of the struggle, the cessation of the inner war we wage against reality. It is the mind returning to its natural state, luminous, peaceful, and free. This state of nirodha is synonymous with the more famous term nirvana or nibbana in the original Pali. Nirvana has been imagined in the West as a kind of heavenly paradise, a blissful afterlife. But the Buddha described it as something that could be touched, realized, and lived right here and now, in this very life. It is not a place you go to, it is a state you uncover within yourself. Imagine a deep, clear lake. The winds of life gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain will always blow across its surface, creating ripples and waves. Most of us live our lives identified with these turbulent surface ripples, tossed about by every changing circumstance. Nirvana is the realization that you are not the waves, you are the entire lake. It is the discovery of the profound stillness in the depths, a peace that remains untouched and undisturbed regardless of the storms on the surface. It is not a state of blissful blankness or emotionless apathy. It is an unshakable peace that underlies all experience, allowing you to feel joy more fully without clinging to it, and to feel sorrow more gently without being shattered by it. It is the ultimate freedom from the tyranny of your own reactive mind. A common fear that arises here is that letting go of craving, of tanha, means becoming a passionless, uncaring robot. If we let go of our attachments, does that mean we can no longer love? The truth is the precise opposite. The kind of love that is rooted in tanha is a love rooted in need. It is a clinging love that says, I need you to make me happy. I need you to behave in a certain way, to validate my sense of self. My peace depends on you. This is not freedom. It is a form of imprisonment for both people. Nirodha, the cessation of this clinging, allows for a purer, more expansive, and more compassionate form of connection to emerge. It is a love that says, I wish for you to be happy, independent of my own needs. It is the spacious love of a parent who encourages their child to walk their own path, rather than forcing them to fulfill the parent's own unlived dreams. It is the love of a friend who can celebrate your success without a trace of envy. When you are no longer desperately trying to extract happiness from the world and from other people, you are free to engage with the world with genuine curiosity, kindness, and wisdom. You can finally appreciate the beauty of the flower without feeling the need to possess it, to pluck it from the ground, which would only cause it to wither and die. The story of the Buddha's own enlightenment under the Bodhi tree is the ultimate illustration of Nirodha. This was not a battle fought with swords and shields against external armies. It was an internal epic, a final confrontation with the deepest forces of his own mind, personified by the tempter, Mara. As Siddhartha sat in deep meditation, resolved not to move until he found the truth, Mara appeared, representing the entirety of Tanha. First, he paraded his beautiful daughter's personifications of desire, attachment, and craving to seduce Siddhartha with the promise of sensory pleasure, of kama-tanha. But Siddhartha, his mind settled and clear, remained unmoved. He simply saw the fleeting, unsatisfactory nature of these pleasures. Failing this, Mara summoned vast armies of terrifying demons, launching a barrage of weapons and threats, attempting to generate fear and aversion. This was the assault of bhava tanha and vibhava tanhathe, desire to protect the self, the fear of annihilation. But as the flaming arrows and razor-sharp discs flew towards Siddhartha, they transformed in mid-air, falling at his feet as a gentle rain of fragrant lotus petals. He did not fight back. He did not run away. He simply sat in a state of unshakable equanimity, knowing that these terrifying forms were nothing more than projections of his own mind. He had no self to defend, no ego to protect, and so the weapons had no target. Finally, in a last, subtle attempt, Mara challenged Siddhartha's right to even sit on that spot of earth, claiming it for himself. He whispered that even if Siddhartha did attain this profound peace, he should keep it for himself, to disappear into a blissful, private escape. This was the temptation of a quietist non-existence, a final, subtle form of craving. In response, Siddhartha did not argue. He did not make a claim. He simply reached down with his right hand and touched the earth. This simple, profound gesture was his only response. The earth itself, he was saying, is my witness. My right to be here comes not from any personal claim or ego, but from my groundedness in reality itself. In that moment of touching the earth, Mara and his armies vanished like a phantom in the morning light. The fires of greed, hatred, and delusion were fully extinguished. The fever had broken. Siddhartha had realized Nirodha. He had become the Buddha, the awakened one. What he awakened to was this very truth, that the end of suffering is possible. It is not about adding anything to yourself, not more knowledge, not more power, not more virtue. It is a process of unbecoming. It is a process of letting go, of unburdening the mind of all the layers of grasping and fear that have obscured its natural radiance. It is the realization that the peace you have been seeking in the external world, in fleeting pleasures and fragile identities, has been waiting within you all along, like a clear sky hidden by passing clouds. The clouds are not the sky. Your suffering is not your true nature. The third noble truth, the truth of Nirodha, is the pivot upon which the entire path turns. It transforms the practice from a grim struggle against suffering into a joyful journey toward freedom. It assures us that our efforts are not in vain, that there is a harbor of peace beyond the turbulent seas of our conditioned existence. Its discovery gives rise to a final, profoundly practical question. It is the question every patient asks after hearing the good news that a cure exists. How? What is the treatment? What are the specific practical steps I must take to walk the path from the fire of suffering to the cool, clear peace of its cessation? The answer to this question constitutes the fourth and final noble truth, the blueprint for liberation itself. We stand now at a place of profound hope. We have seen the illness of dukkha, the pervasive dissatisfaction of our lives. We have identified its root cause in the burning thirst of tanha, our relentless craving. And we have heard the physician's promise of a cure, the reality of nirodha, the cessation of this suffering. The final and most vital piece of the puzzle is now laid before us. It is the prescription itself. It is the practical, detailed, and life-altering answer to the question, how? This answer is the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path leading to the end of suffering. It is known as the Noble Eightfold Path, or in Pali, Aryo Atthajjako Magga. This is not a set of rigid commandments to be followed out of blind faith. It is a guide, a map, a comprehensive curriculum for cultivating the heart and mind, designed to be explored, practiced, and verified within your own direct experience. To understand the nature of this path, it is helpful to use a classic Buddhist metaphor. Imagine you are standing on the bank of a wide, turbulent river. This near shore represents our ordinary life, caught in the currents of samsara, endless cycle of suffering, craving, and dissatisfaction. The far shore, visible but distant, represents nirvana, the state of peace, freedom, and the end of suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path is the raft that you build, piece by piece, to safely make the crossing. It is a practical tool, exquisitely designed for a specific purpose, to carry you from suffering to freedom. And like any well-built raft, every single part is essential. It is not a sequence of steps you take one after another. It is a set of 8 components that must be developed and woven together, each one supporting and strengthening all the others. Progress in one area makes progress in the others possible. It is less like a linear ladder and more like a beautifully braided cord, whose strength comes from the interplay of its 8 strands. To make this elegant system more understandable, the 8 factors of the path are traditionally grouped into 3 essential trainings. These are not separate stages, but 3 aspects of a single, holistic education. The first is the training in wisdom, or panya. The second is the training in ethical conduct, or sila. And the third is the training in mental discipline, or samadhi. Together, they form a complete blueprint for human flourishing, addressing every aspect of our lives, views, our intentions, our actions, and the inner workings of our own minds. This is a path for householders and city dwellers, for parents and professionals, for anyone seeking to live with greater peace and clarity in the midst of a complex world. Let us first look at the foundation of the path, the training in wisdom, panya. This group contains the first 2 factors, which act as our compass and our map. They orient us, ensuring our journey is headed in the right direction. The very first factor is right view, or samaditthi. This is the bedrock of the entire path. It means seeing the world, ourselves, and the nature of reality as it truly is, not as we wish it were, or fear it might be. It is the clear-eyed understanding of the 4 noble truths, themselves seeing dukkha, its cause, its cessation, and the path that leads to that cessation. It is the understanding of concepts like impermanence, and the law of cause and effect, or karma. Right view is not about adopting a set of beliefs, but about cultivating a perspective that is aligned with reality. It is the difference between navigating with an accurate map versus a child's drawing. Without right view, our efforts, no matter how sincere, can lead us astray. The second factor in the wisdom group is right intention, or sammasankappa. While right view is the seeing, right intention is the aligning of the heart. It is the conscious cultivation of motivations that are wholesome and pure. It is about checking the why behind our thoughts, words, and actions. This intention is threefold. First, the intention of renunciation, which means the willingness to let go of our clinging to worldly pleasures and our addiction to craving. Second, the intention of goodwill, which is the active cultivation of loving kindness and the desire for all beings to be happy, a direct antidote to hatred and ill will. And third, the intention of harmlessness, or compassion, which is the deep wish that all beings be free from suffering, an antidote to cruelty and violence. Right intention is the rudder of our raft, steering us constantly toward the far shore of peace. Next, we have the training in ethical conduct, or sila. This group comprises 3 factors and governs how we engage with the world. It is the practical application of our wisdom and intention in our daily lives. This is how we ensure our raft is watertight, causing no harm to ourselves or others on our journey. The third factor of the path is right speech, or samavacha. This is the practice of using our words with skill and kindness. It means abstaining from lying, from divisive speech that sets people against one another, from harsh speech that wounds and abuses, and from idle chatter that distracts the mind and wastes precious energy. It is the practice of speaking truthfully, gently, and only when necessary, using our words as tools to heal and connect, not to harm. The fourth factor is right action, or sammakamanta. This involves our physical behaviors. At its core, it is the commitment to a life of harmlessness. This is traditionally expressed as abstaining from killing any living being, abstaining from stealing or taking what is not freely given, and abstaining from sexual misconduct, which means avoiding any sexual behavior that causes harm to ourselves or others. Right action is about moving through the world with a sense of reverence for life, respecting the bodies, property, and relationships of others, as we would wish our own to be respected. The fifth factor is right livelihood, or samma-ajiva. This brings the path directly into our modern world of work and commerce. It means earning a living in a way that is honest, ethical, and does not cause harm to other beings. This practice encourages us to avoid professions based on deception, exploitation, or violence, such as trading in weapons, poisons, intoxicants, or engaging in the trafficking of human or animal life. It asks us to consider the impact of our work on the world and to find a way to contribute to society that is in harmony with our deepest values of compassion and integrity. Finally, we come to the third training, mental discipline, or samadhi. This is the inner work. If sila is about managing our external actions, samadhi is about mastering the inner world of the mind itself. This is the training that gives us the strength and stability to stay on the raft, even when the river is stormy. The sixth factor is right effort, or samma-vayama. This is the balanced, intelligent application of our energy. It is not a grim, forceful striving, but a joyful diligence. This effort is fourfold. The effort to prevent unwholesome states, like anger or jealousy, from arising. The effort to abandon these states if they have already arisen. The effort to cultivate wholesome states, like kindness and generosity, that have not yet arisen. And the effort to maintain and develop these wholesome states that are already present. It is the art of being a skillful gardener of your own mind. The seventh factor, which lies at the heart of the practice, is right mindfulness, or samasati. This is the capacity to pay attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. It is the practice of bringing a clear, non-reactive awareness to our own experience, to the sensations in our body, to the feelings that arise and pass away, to the thoughts that flicker through the mind, and to the nature of reality itself. Mindfulness is the anchor that keeps us grounded in the here and now, preventing the mind from being carried away by regrets about the past or anxieties about the future. It is the master tool for developing self-awareness. The eighth and final factor is right concentration, or samma samadhi. This is the fruit of sustained right effort and right mindfulness. It is the ability of the mind to become collected and unified, to settle upon a single object with unwavering stability. This is not a trance-like state, but a state of heightened, vibrant clarity and profound peace. A concentrated mind is a powerful mind, capable of seeing through the surface illusions of reality and gaining the deep, transformative insights that constitute wisdom. It is the stillness of the deep lake, the state in which the true nature of things can be clearly reflected. This, then, is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a design for living, a raft for crossing the river. It is a practical, integrated system where our view of the world informs our intention guides our actions, and our actions create a life stable enough to support the deep inner work of training the mind. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey on this path begins with its very foundation. We must start by ensuring we are looking in the right direction. Therefore, we will begin our deep exploration with the first and most fundamental plank of the raft, the guiding light for the entire journey, the cultivation of right view. We have now before us the grand design of the path, the eightfold map that leads from the shore of suffering to the shore of peace. Like any wise traveler embarking on a momentous journey, our first task is not to take a step, but to consult the map. We must understand the terrain, know the destination, and orient ourselves correctly. This act of orientation, of seeing clearly, is the first factor of the path and the very foundation upon which all else is built. It is right view, or samadhi. Without right view, our efforts, no matter how sincere or strenuous, are like sailing a ship without a compass. We may have tremendous energy, but we will be sailing blind, driven by the winds of habit and confusion, and may end up further from our destination than when we began. Right view is the light that illuminates the path, ensuring that every step we take is a step toward freedom. It is essential to understand, from the very beginning, what right view is not. It is not a demand for blind faith. It is not a list of doctrines or dogmas that you must accept without question. The spirit of the Buddhist path is captured in the Pali word ehipassiko, a personal invitation from the Buddha himself, which means, come and see for yourself. Right view is not a set of answers to be memorized, but a new lens through which to look at your own experience. It begins, perhaps, as a form of intellectual understanding, like studying the details on a map before you begin a hike. You trust that the map, created by experienced travelers before you, is accurate, but the ultimate goal is to transform that conceptual knowledge into a direct, experiential wisdom, to walk the terrain yourself and see with your own eyes that the map is true. Right view is an evolving perspective, a clarity that deepens over time as our practice of mindfulness and concentration grows. At its core, right view is the clear seeing of reality as it is, particularly as it relates to our own suffering and its cessation. This seeing primarily involves the deep, personal understanding of three fundamental laws of existence. The first of these is the law of karma, or kamma. This is a concept often misunderstood in the West as a system of cosmic justice, a supernatural force that doles out rewards and punishments. The Buddhist understanding is far more simple, rational, and empowering. Karma is simply the law of cause and effect as it applies to our intentional actions. It means that our actions, driven by our intentions, have consequences. Wholesome intentions, those rooted in kindness, generosity, and clarity, inevitably lead to wholesome results, planting the seeds of happiness and peace for ourselves and others. Unwholesome intentions, those rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, inevitably lead to unwholesome results, planting the seeds of suffering and conflict. It is the simple, agricultural wisdom that if you plant a seed of an apple, you will get an apple tree. You will not get a thorny vine. This view frees us from the twin delusions of helplessness and blame. We are not the passive victims of a random universe, nor are we being punished by an angry God. We are the architects of our own experience. Every moment presents us with a choice, to plant a seed of peace or a seed of suffering. Right view is the clarity to see this choice and its consequences. The second pillar of right view is the profound understanding of impermanence, or anicca. This is the recognition that every single thing in the conditioned universe, without exception, is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static. Your body is changing with every breath. Your thoughts are a flickering stream, arising and vanishing from moment to moment. Your emotions are like the weather, passing clouds in the vast sky of your awareness. The relationships you cherish, the society you live in, the planet you stand on, even the mountains that seem so solidal, are subject to change and transformation. Our deepest suffering, as we have seen, comes from our resistance to this truth. We try to grasp onto pleasant moments, to hold on to our youth and health, to solidify our relationships, to build permanent monuments in a world that is fundamentally a river. Right view is the courage to relax our grip, to see this constant flow not as a threat, but as the very nature of life. This understanding is not a morbid or depressing one. On the contrary, it is liberating, because things are impermanent, change is possible, sadness can give way to joy, conflict can resolve into peace, our own unskillful habits can be transformed. By embracing impermanence, we learn to appreciate the preciousness of the present moment, knowing it will not last forever, and we learn to navigate the changes of life with greater grace, flexibility, and peace. The third and most transformative insight of right view is the understanding of no self, or anatta. This is perhaps the most challenging and radical of the Buddha's teachings, and the one most easily misunderstood. No self does not mean that you do not exist. It does not mean that you are a walking void. You are here, reading these words, thinking these thoughts. The teaching of anatta points to the way in which you exist. It reveals that there is no fixed, permanent, independent CEO or soul residing somewhere inside your mind and body, pulling the levers. What we call ourself is not a static thing, but a dynamic, ever-changing process. It is a temporary coming together of physical and mental components: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. These components are constantly arising and passing away, dependent on a multitude of conditions. The you of this moment is different from the you of 5 minutes ago, and profoundly different from the you of 20 years ago. We suffer because we grasp onto this fleeting process and try to label it as a solid, permanent me or mine, and then we spend our lives defending and gratifying this imaginary entity. To illustrate this, there is a famous parable of the blind men and the elephant. A king brought an elephant before a group of men who had been blind from birth. He asked them to touch the animal and describe what it was. The first man touched the elephant's leg and declared, "An elephant is like a great, sturdy pillar." The second man touched the tail and said, "No, you are wrong. An elephant is like a rope with a frayed end." The third touched the trunk and proclaimed, "You are both fools. An elephant is clearly like a thick snake." Another touched the ear and described it as a large fan, another the tusk, describing it as a hard spear, and another the side, describing it as a solid wall. Soon they were all embroiled in a bitter argument, each one absolutely certain of their own limited perspective. The king then explained their folly. Each one of them was partly right in his description of a part, but all of them were completely wrong in their understanding of the whole. Our ordinary, unexamined view of ourselves is just like that of the blind men. We grasp onto a single, transient part of our experiencer, thought, an emotion, a sensation in the body, and we proclaim, "This is me, this is who I am." We mistake a tiny, fleeting part for a permanent, unified whole. Right view, or samadhi, is the ability to see the whole elephant. It is the wisdom that sees the self not as a solid thing, but as a dynamic, interconnected process, a symphony of changing parts. This insight is the ultimate antidote to the ego's fears and anxieties. When we see there is no fixed self to defend, our fear of criticism diminishes. When we see there is no permanent self to aggrandize, our need for fame and status withers. When we see there is no separate self, our sense of connection to all life deepens. Right view, then, is the clear lens that corrects our distorted vision of reality. It is the understanding that our actions shape our destiny, that all things are in a state of flux, and that our rigid sense of a separate self is a fundamental illusion. This clarity is not the end of the journey, but its true beginning. Once our vision is clear, once we are holding the map correctly, a natural question arises. If this is the true nature of things, then how should I orient my heart? What kind of motivations and aspirations are in harmony with this clear seeing? With a correct understanding of the landscape, we can now set the direction of our travel. This brings us to the second factor of the path, the vital and compassionate work of cultivating right intention. Having charted the terrain with the map of right view, we arrive at the second crucial factor of the path, a factor that bridges the gap between seeing and doing. This is right intention, or samma sankappa. If right view is the clear seeing of the landscape, right intention is the conscious and deliberate setting of our compass. It is the alignment of our deepest motivations with the truth we have come to see. A map is useless if the traveler has no desire to go anywhere, or worse, is determined to walk in the wrong direction. Right intention is the cultivation of the heart's resolve, the purification of the why that drives every thought, every word, and every action we undertake. It is the quiet, internal alchemy that transforms our raw human energy from a force of potential suffering into a force for liberation. In our ordinary lives, we rarely stop to examine our intentions. We are driven by a complex web of habit, conditioning, fear, and desire, often acting on autopilot. We might perform a kind act, but is it born from genuine goodwill, or from a subtle desire for recognition and praise? We might pursue a goal, but is it driven by a wholesome desire to contribute, or by an anxious need to prove our worth? The Buddha taught that the karmic quality of an action, its power to create either happiness or suffering, is determined not by the external appearance of the act itself, but by the intention, the volition, that lies behind it. Intention is the seed, The action is the plant that grows from it, and the result is the fruit it will inevitably bear. Right intention, therefore, is the practice of consciously choosing to plant only the seeds of wisdom and compassion in the fertile ground of our mind. This practice is not about a single decision, but a continuous process of training the heart. It involves the gradual replacement of unwholesome, self-centered intentions with wholesome, liberating ones. The Buddha simplified this training by grouping our intentions into 3 essential pairs, guiding us to systematically abandon the intentions that lead to suffering and to actively cultivate those that lead to peace. These are the intention of renunciation over the intention of craving, the intention of goodwill over the intention of ill will, and the intention of harmlessness over the intention of cruelty. This is the recalibration of the compass of the heart. The first of these guiding stars is the intention of renunciation, or nekkhamma sankappa. This is perhaps the most countercultural and misunderstood of the 3. Our modern world is built almost entirely on the opposite intention, the intention of acquisition, accumulation, and sensual gratification. We are taught from birth that happiness is something to be found outside of ourselves in a bigger house, a more prestigious job, a more attractive partner, the next exciting experience. We are conditioned to live in a state of perpetual poverty mentality, a gnawing sense of lack, always feeling that if we just had that one more thing, we would finally be complete. The intention of renunciation is a radical and liberating rebellion against this tyranny of more. Renunciation does not mean forcing yourself to live a life of grim, joyless austerity. It is not about self-punishment or developing a hatred for the world. Rather, it is the wise and compassionate intention to let go of the feverish clinging to the objects of our desire. It is the recognition that our dependency on fleeting external conditions for our happiness is the very source of our anxiety and disappointment. To cultivate the intention of renunciation is to turn inward and discover the source of a deeper, more stable contentment, a wealth that cannot be taken away. It is a shift from the poverty of endless, wanting to the true abundance of inner peace. In practice, this intention begins with small, mindful acts of letting go. It is noticing the reflexive urge to pull out your phone to escape a moment of boredom, and instead, choosing to simply be present with the quiet. It is seeing an advertisement that sparks a desire for something you don't need, and instead of indulging the fantasy, gently acknowledging the craving and letting it pass without action. It is looking at your life and simplifying, releasing the clutter of possessions, obligations, and ambitions that drain your energy and complicate your mind. It is learning to appreciate simple pleasures: a walk in nature, a quiet cup of tea, a genuine conversation without needing them to be spectacular or Instagrammable. Cultivating the intention of renunciation is like slowly detoxifying the mind from its addiction to craving. It can feel uncomfortable at first, like any withdrawal, but what emerges on the other side is not emptiness, but a spaciousness, a lightness, and a profound sense of freedom. You realize you need far less than you thought to be truly happy, and that the greatest peace comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting what you have. The second guiding principle is the intention of goodwill, or abhyapada sankappa. This is the deliberate resolve to abandon ill will, anger, resentment, and aversion, and to actively cultivate their opposites: loving, kindness, friendliness, and a warm-hearted acceptance of others. If renunciation is about our relationship with things, goodwill is about our relationship with beings. Anger, in the Buddhist view, is a poison. It is often seen as a source of strength, but it is a profoundly weakening and self-destructive force. The old saying captures it perfectly: holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The intention of goodwill is the conscious decision to put down that hot coal, not necessarily for the other person's sake, but for the sake of your own peace. This is not a passive practice of simply not being angry. It is the active, creative cultivation of a positive, friendly attitude. The Pali word for this is metta, often translated as loving kindness. It is a boundless, unconditional well-wishing. It begins with ourselves, learning to replace the voice of the inner critic with a voice of kindness and self-acceptance. From there, we radiate this intention outward. In meditation, we can systematically wish well for ourselves, for our loved ones, for neutral people, for strangers, And most challengingly, for those we find difficult or who have hurt us, we silently repeat phrases like, "May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful. May you live with ease." In daily life, this intention transforms our interactions. It is the choice to look for the good in others, rather than focusing on their faults. It is the practice of giving someone the benefit of the doubt, assuming their hurtful action came from a place of their own suffering or confusion, rather than pure malice. It is refraining from engaging in gossip or cynical talk that hardens the heart. It is the simple act of offering a genuine smile to a stranger. This practice can be immensely challenging. The mind's habit of judging, criticizing, and holding grudges is deeply ingrained. But with persistent, gentle effort, we begin to see that every moment of anger we let go of, every flicker of resentment we replace with a wish for well-being, is a moment of profound liberation for ourselves. We are freeing ourselves from the prison of our own negativity. The third and final aspect of right intention is the intention of harmlessness, or avihimsa sankappa. This is the intention of compassion, or karuna. While goodwill, metta, is the wish for all beings to be happy, compassion, karuna, is the heart's tender response to seeing suffering. It is the deep and active wish for all beings to be free from their pain. This is the foundation of the principle of non-violence that lies at the very heart of the Buddhist path. It is the recognition that all beings, just like ourselves, wish to avoid suffering and pain. With this understanding as our guide, we resolve to live in a way that minimizes the harm we cause in the world. Like the other intentions, harmlessness extends far beyond the obvious. It is not merely the commitment to refrain from physical violence. It is the intention to cause no harm through our words, to avoid speech that is intentionally cruel, divisive, or dismissive of another's feelings. It is the intention to cause no harm through our livelihood, ensuring that the way we make our living does not exploit others or contribute to the suffering of people or animals. In our modern, interconnected world, this intention invites us to look deeply at the consequences of our actions. It asks us to consider the impact of our consumption, to be mindful of the environmental costs of our lifestyle, and to cultivate a sensitivity to the suffering that may be hidden in the supply chains that bring us our food and our goods. To practice the intention of harmlessness is to cultivate empathy. It is the effort to step into another's shoes and feel the weight of their burdens. It is to see the person who is acting out in anger and to sense the fear or pain that is driving their behavior. This compassionate understanding does not mean we condone harmful actions, but it prevents us from reacting with blind hatred. It allows us to respond to difficult situations with greater wisdom and a desire to heal rather than to punish. There is an old story that beautifully illustrates how intention completely transforms an action. Two men in a village decided to undertake the exact same project, to build a beautiful temple. They worked for years with the same materials, using the same architectural plans. The first man was driven by a desire for fame and legacy. He thought constantly of how the villagers would praise his generosity, how his name would be remembered for generations, how this great act would secure his reputation as a pious and important man. Every stone he laid was a monument to his own ego. His heart was filled with anxiety about the opinions of others and a competitive pride in his work. The second man was driven by a completely different intention. He had seen the suffering in the world and felt a deep compassion in his heart. He thought, "May this temple be a place of peace. May those who are troubled find solace here. May it be a sanctuary where the seeds of wisdom can be planted in the hearts of many." Every stone he laid was an act of selfless service, a prayer for the well-being of others. His heart was filled with a quiet joy and a deep sense of purpose, entirely free from any thought of personal gain. Outwardly, their actions were identical. They both built a temple, but inwardly, they were living in two different universes. The first man, driven by the intention of self-aggrandizement, was planting the seeds of attachment, anxiety, and ego clinging. His act, though appearing noble, was simply another chain binding him to the cycle of suffering. The second man, driven by the intentions of goodwill and harmlessness, was planting the seeds of peace, joy, and liberation. His act was a source of profound freedom. This is the power and practice of right intention. It is the constant, quiet work of checking the compass of our heart. It is the ongoing process of asking, why? And gently, patiently, steering our motivations away from the magnetic pull of greed, hatred, and delusion, and toward the true north of renunciation, goodwill, and compassion. Once our view of the world is clear, and our heart's intention is pure, the path naturally begins to manifest in our engagement with the world. The first and most common way we express our inner state is through the words we speak. And so, with a clear map and a true compass, we are now ready to take the next step onto the path, into the realm of our interaction with others, beginning with the profound practice of right speech. Having aligned our journey with the map of right view and calibrated our direction with the compass of right intention, we now arrive at the first expression of this inner alignment in the outer world. We begin the training in ethical conduct, sila, with the most common, powerful, and often unconscious action we perform every single day, the act of speech. This is the practice of right speech, or samavacha. Our words are not merely vibrations in the air, they are potent, creative forces. With our words, we can build bridges of understanding, or dig trenches of division. We can soothe a wounded spirit, or inflict a scar that never heals. We can illuminate the truth, or weave a web of delusion. Every time we speak, we are performing a significant karmic act, planting a seed that will bear fruit in our own lives and the lives of others. The practice of right speech is the conscious, mindful cultivation of our words, transforming them from habitual reactions into skillful tools for creating peace, clarity, and connection. The Buddha laid out this practice in 4 clear, practical guidelines, a fourfold path to purifying our communication. The first principle of right speech is to abstain from false speech, or musavada. At its simplest, this means telling the truth. It is a commitment to honesty and integrity in all our communications. But this practice goes much deeper than simply avoiding outright lies. It includes the more subtle forms of dishonesty that we often employ to protect our ego or to gain an advantage. It means abstaining from exaggeration, from making promises we have no intention of keeping, from presenting half-truths that are designed to mislead. It is the practice of being impeccably honest, not just with others but with ourselves. We often lie because we are afraid of the consequences, afraid of looking bad, afraid of not getting what we want. Each time we choose truth over falsehood, especially when it is difficult, we are performing an act of courage. We are affirming that our commitment to reality is stronger than our fear. The consequence of false speech is a world of mistrust and suspicion. When we are dishonest, we not only damage our relationships with others, we damage our relationship with ourselves. We create a fracture in our own mind, a dissonance between what we know to be true and what we present to the world. Over time, we can even come to believe our own fabrications, losing our own inner compass of integrity. To practice truthful speech is to build a life on the solid ground of reality, creating a sanctuary of trust for those around us, and, most importantly, fostering an unwavering sense of self-respect. The second principle is to abstain from divisive speech, or pisunaya vachaya. This is speech that is used as a weapon to set one person against another. It is slander, backbiting, and the kind of malicious gossip that aims to destroy another's reputation or relationships. It is taking what one has heard in one place and, with ill intent, repeating it in another to cause strife and disharmony. This kind of speech is a subtle poison. It may provide a fleeting sense of power or belonging to an in-group, but it creates an atmosphere of toxicity, fear, and suspicion. In the modern world, this practice is particularly relevant. Online forums, social media, and even office environments can become breeding grounds for divisive talk, where anonymous comments and whispered rumors can ruin lives. The root of divisive speech is often our own insecurity, jealousy, or the desire to elevate ourselves by putting others down. The practice of abstaining from it requires a mindful awareness of these impulses. It also involves an active commitment to the opposite, to unifying speech. This means looking for opportunities to speak of the good qualities of others, to clear up misunderstandings where we see them, and to refuse to participate in conversations that are built on tearing someone else down. It is the resolve to use our words not as wedges to drive people apart, but as thread to weave them together. The third principle is to abstain from harsh speech, or farusaya vachaya. This is speech that is intended to cause pain. It includes insults, yelling, belittling comments, verbal abuse, and the sharp, cutting sarcasm that is designed to wound. Harsh speech is the verbal equivalent of physical violence. While a physical bruise may fade, the memory of a cruel word can fester in the heart for a lifetime, shaping a person's self-esteem and their ability to trust. Harsh speech almost always erupts from our own uncontrolled anger and pain. It is a violent expulsion of our own inner suffering projected onto someone else. When we are in the grip of anger, we are temporarily insane, and our words become weapons. The practice of abstaining from harsh speech is therefore deeply connected to the practice of mindfulness. It requires us to become aware of the rising tide of anger within us before it spills out of our mouths. It is the wisdom to pause, to take a breath, and to recognize that no good can come from speaking from a place of rage. This does not mean we become passive or never express disagreement. It means that when we must speak of difficult things, we do so with care and gentleness, with an intention to solve a problem rather than to win a battle or inflict pain. It is the art of being firm in principle, but soft in tone, speaking the truth with kindness. The fourth and final principle is to abstain from idle chatter, or samphapalapa. This is pointless, aimless talk. It is the kind of speech that serves no real purpose, mindless gossip, endless speculation, and chatter that simply fills the air with noise. While it may seem harmless compared to lying or harsh speech, idle chatter has a subtly corrosive effect on the mind. It dissipates our precious mental energy, leaving the mind scattered, agitated, and unfocused. It is the enemy of inner peace and concentration. A mind that is constantly engaged in meaningless talk is like a leaky bucket, unable to hold the stillness and clarity necessary for deep insight. The practice of abstaining from idle chatter is a practice in valuing our words and our attention. It is the recognition that silence can often be more meaningful and communicative than a stream of empty words. This leads to the cultivation of what is known as noble silence, an awkward or tense silence, but the peaceful, aware silence of a mind that is at rest. It is speaking only when one has something true, kind, and beneficial to say, and at a time when it is appropriate to say it. These four principles guide what we say, but the practice of right speech also deeply informs how we listen. True communication is a two-way street. To speak skillfully, we must also listen skillfully. This is the practice of deep listening, not just to the words someone is saying, but to the feelings and the suffering behind their words. It is listening without preparing our rebuttal, without judging or interrupting. It is offering the other person the rare and profound gift of our full, non-judgmental presence. In this space of deep listening, others feel safe to express their true selves, and genuine understanding can blossom. There is a Zen story that powerfully illustrates the freedom that comes from mastering our relationship with words. A wise Zen master lived in a small village. One day, the teenage daughter of his neighbors was found to be pregnant. Furious, her parents demanded to know who the father was. To protect her young lover, the girl named the Zen master. The parents, enraged, stormed over to the master's house, berated him for his hypocrisy, and told him he would now have to raise the child. The master's only reply was, "Is that so?" When the child was born, they brought him to the master, who accepted him and cared for him with great love and tenderness. His reputation in the village was ruined, but he was unconcerned. A year later, the young girl, overcome with guilt, confessed the truth to her parents. The real father was a young man from the village. The mortified parents rushed back to the master's house, bowed low, apologized profusely, and asked for the child back. The master, handing the child over, simply said, "Is that so?" The master demonstrated a mind completely unmoved by the words of the world. He was not attached to the praise of a good reputation, nor was he disturbed by the blame of a false accusation. His inner peace was not dependent on what others said about him. This is the ultimate fruit of right speech and a tranquil mind. It is the practice of making our words a sanctuary for ourselves and others, a place of truth, harmony, gentleness, and purpose. As we bring this mindfulness and skill to our speech, this ethical training naturally begins to pervade the rest of our lives. From the words we speak, we turn now to the deeds we perform, exploring the next essential factor of the path, right action. From the inner world of right view and right intention, we have moved into the outer world through the gateway of our words, learning to cultivate right speech. Now, The path calls us to embody our understanding in an even more tangible way, through the actions of our body. This is the fourth factor of the path, right action, or samma kammanta. This is the practice of moving through the world with mindful, compassionate, and ethical conduct. It is where our inner aspirations for peace and harmlessness become a visible reality, leaving gentle footprints on the earth, rather than scars of conflict and harm. Our actions are the most direct expression of our character. They are the ultimate test of our practice. Right action is the commitment to ensure that our physical presence in the world is a source of safety and well-being for all those we encounter. This practice is traditionally guided by a set of training principles, often known as the 5 precepts. It is vital to approach these not as a rigid list of commandments handed down by an authority, but as profound voluntary vows of protection. They are not designed to restrict our freedom, but to create it. By following these guidelines, we protect others from harm, and in doing so, we protect ourselves from the poisonous consequences of unskillful action, the guilt, the remorse, the fear of discovery, and the agitation of mind that always follow in the wake of harmful deeds. They are the guardrails on the side of the path that prevent us from falling into the chasms of regret and self-recrimination, allowing our journey toward peace to proceed on solid ground. The first and most fundamental principle of right action is to abstain from the taking of life. This is the commitment to non-violence, or ahimsa, in its most direct form. On the surface, this means abstaining from killing other human beings, but its spirit extends much further, calling for the cultivation of a deep and abiding reverence for all living things. It is the recognition that every being, from the largest mammal to the smallest insect, shares with us a fundamental desire to live and to avoid pain. To practice this precept is to actively train ourselves out of the habit of reflexive violence. It is choosing not to crush the spider in the corner, but to gently trap it and release it outside. It is refusing to participate in sports or hobbies that involve harming or killing animals for entertainment. For many, this principle leads to a deep reflection on their diet, inspiring a move toward vegetarianism or veganism as a way to withdraw their participation from the vast systems of suffering involved in industrial animal agriculture. This practice is not about achieving a state of perfect, impossible harmlessness, but about cultivating a heart that leans instinctively toward gentleness and preservation, rather than destruction. By protecting the lives of others, we starve the roots of aggression and violence within our own minds, nurturing an inner landscape of peace. The second principle of right action is to abstain from taking what is not freely given. This is the practice of radical honesty and respect for the property and efforts of others. While this certainly includes abstaining from obvious acts like theft and burglary, its modern application is vast and nuanced. It means refraining from stealing supplies from the workplace, from cheating on our taxes, from downloading copyrighted music or software without paying for it. It means being honest in our business dealings, not misrepresenting a product or taking advantage of a customer's ignorance. It is the commitment not to plagiarize or take credit for the work and ideas of another. At its core, this precept is about counteracting the mind of greed and the feeling of lack. The impulse to take what is not ours comes from the mistaken belief that our happiness depends on acquiring more external things. The true practice of right action here is not just the passive act of not taking, but the active and joyful cultivation of its opposite, generosity or dana. It is the practice of giving freely, without expecting anything in return. We can give our time, our money, our expertise, a listening ear, or a helping hand. Each act of generosity, no matter how small, directly weakens the muscle of greed and strengthens the heart of contentment. It is the shift from asking, "What can I get?" to asking, "What can I give?" The third principle is to abstain from sexual misconduct. This precept calls for us to bring mindfulness, respect, and kindness into our most intimate relationships. It is crucial to understand that this is not a puritanical rejection of sexuality. The Buddha recognized sexuality as a powerful, natural human energy. This training is about learning to channel that energy skillfully and harmlessly. Sexual misconduct is defined as any sexual act that causes harm to oneself or others through exploitation, coercion, or deceit. This most clearly includes acts like adultery, which betray trust, break commitments, and cause profound pain to families. It includes any form of sexual harassment or taking advantage of another person's vulnerability. It is about ensuring that our sexual relationships are founded on a bedrock of mutual consent, honesty, and genuine care, rather than being driven by selfish grasping, loneliness, or the desire to use another person as an object for our own gratification. It is the practice of honoring the dignity and heart of another person, recognizing that true intimacy can only flourish in an atmosphere of safety, respect, and trust. The story of Angulimala serves as one of the most powerful testaments to the transformative potential of this path. Angulimala was a feared serial killer who terrorized the kingdom of Kosala. His name meant finger garland, as he wore a gruesome necklace made from the fingers of his many victims. One day, the Buddha, seeing with his enlightened vision that Angulimala was on the verge of committing the ultimate evil of killing his own mother, walked calmly toward the forest where the murderer lived. Angulimala saw the serene monk and thought, "At last, an easy target." He began to run, but a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up to him. Exhausted and bewildered, he yelled out, "Stop, ascetic, stop!" The Buddha, still walking, turned and replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." These words struck Angulimala like a bolt of lightning. He understood at once that the Buddha was not speaking of physical movement, but of the relentless, violent spinning of his own mind. The Buddha had stopped the cycle of violence, hatred, and killing. Angulimala was still running on that terrible wheel. In that moment, something broke open within him. He threw down his weapons, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and asked to become a monk. Despite his horrific past, the Buddha accepted him. The path of right action is not about having a flawless history. It is about the commitment we make in the present. Angulimala's practice was not easy. When he went for alms in the village, people who remembered his past threw stones and sticks at him, shouting insults. But Angulimala, his heart now trained in patience and harmlessness, bore it all without retaliation. He knew this was simply the ripening of his past deeds. Through his dedicated practice, this man who was once the embodiment of violence and hatred completely purified his mind and became an arhat, a fully awakened being. This story reveals the profound truth of right action. It is the vehicle of our transformation. The principles of harmlessness, honesty, and mindful conduct are not burdens. They are the very actions that liberate us from the heavy chains of our own past and the reactive patterns of our mind. By committing ourselves to a path of ethical action, we create a life free from the poisons of remorse and guilt, a life of inner and outer peace. Our speech is now aligned with kindness, our actions with compassion. We now turn to the domain that occupies so much of our time and energy, our work. How do we ensure that the way we sustain our physical lives is also in harmony with our deepest spiritual values? This question leads us directly to the fifth factor of the path, the practice of right livelihood. Having established an ethical framework for our speech through right speech and for our personal conduct through right action, the path now invites us to bring this same integrity into the area where we spend the majority of our waking lives, our work. This is the fifth factor of the path and the final element in the training of ethical conduct, sila. It is the practice of right livelihood, or samma ajiva. For our spiritual practice to be truly transformative, it cannot be a hobby we attend to only in the evenings or on weekends. It must be woven into the very fabric of our existence. And for most of us, that fabric is largely defined by the work we do to support ourselves and our families. Right livelihood is the commitment to earn our living in a manner that is honest, honorable, and, most importantly, harmless. It asks us to consider a profound question. Is my work a source of well-being in the world? Or is it, knowingly or unknowingly, a cause of suffering? In the time of the Buddha, the guidelines for right livelihood were laid out with straightforward clarity. The suttas describe 5 specific types of commerce that a lay follower should avoid because they are fundamentally based on causing harm. The first is dealing in weapons, which is the business of profiting from conflict and violence. The second is dealing in living beings, which includes human trafficking and the raising and selling of animals for slaughter. The third, an extension of the second, is the business of dealing in meat, profiting directly from the flesh of killed beings. The fourth is dealing in intoxicants, which is the business of selling substances that lead to heedlessness, addiction, and a clouding of the mind. And the fifth is dealing in poisons, which is the business of profiting from substances designed to kill. The common thread running through this list is clear and undeniable. Right livelihood means, at a minimum, refraining from work whose primary purpose is to deceive, exploit, intoxicate, or end life. It is a compassionate refusal to build our own sustenance on the suffering of others. In our complex, globalized, 21st century economy, applying these principles is not always so straightforward. Few of us are faced with the explicit choice of becoming an arms dealer or a poison merchant. Yet, the spirit of these guidelines challenges us to look deeply and honestly at the nature of our work and its ripple effects in the world. The practice of right livelihood today is not about consulting a simple list of forbidden jobs, but about cultivating a deep and ongoing ethical inquiry. How might these ancient principles translate to our modern context? The prohibition against dealing in weapons might extend to working for industries that fuel social division, political polarization, or international conflict. The warning against dealing in intoxicants might lead us to question working in fields that knowingly promote addiction, whether to gambling, junk food, or even the validation loops of social media. The principle of not dealing in poisons might relate to working for companies that pollute our environment or engage in predatory financial practices that poison people's lives with debt. The practice of right livelihood invites us to become ethical investigators of our own lives. It asks us to look past our job title and our salary and to ask probing questions. What is the fundamental mission of the company I work for? Does the product or service I help create genuinely contribute to human well-being, or does it exploit a weakness or create a need where none existed? Am I asked, either explicitly or implicitly, to compromise my values of honesty and compassion in order to succeed? Does my work leave me feeling energized and purposeful, or drained and conflicted? This inquiry must be undertaken with great self-compassion. The reality is that many people do not have the luxury of choosing their ideal job. We have families to support, bills to pay, and responsibilities to meet. The point is not to generate guilt, or to demand that everyone immediately quit their job if it falls short of perfection. The point is to cultivate a clear intention, to set our inner compass toward a livelihood that is in greater harmony with our heart. The journey may be long, but the direction is what matters. This brings us to a crucial aspect of the practice. Right livelihood is as much about how you work as it is about what you do. If you find yourself in a position where changing your career is not a viable option, you can still practice right livelihood with great integrity, transforming your current workplace into a field for practice. You can commit to bringing the other factors of the path into your 9-to-5 life. You can practice right speech in your meetings, refusing to engage in gossip and communicating with honesty and kindness. You can practice right action in your dealings with colleagues and clients, acting with integrity and refusing to cut corners. You can practice right intention by shifting your motivation from simply earning a paycheck or climbing the ladder to being of genuine service. You can ask yourself, how can I use my position to reduce suffering and create well-being today? A customer service representative can transform their work by intending to bring a moment of patient, compassionate listening to a frustrated customer. A manager can make it their practice to create a supportive, respectful, and humane environment for their team. A teacher can focus not just on the curriculum, but on nurturing the seeds of kindness and curiosity in their students. By changing our inner motivation, we can find meaning and purpose even in the most mundane of jobs. Consider the modern parable of a talented marketing executive working for a large corporation. She is highly successful, but feels a growing emptiness, a sense of conflict, as her primary job is to create clever campaigns that entice people to consume products they don't need, products that may even be unhealthy. She realizes her livelihood is not in alignment with her values. For her, the path of right livelihood might take one of two forms. In the first, she makes an external change. After careful planning, she leaves her corporate job, takes a significant pay cut, and accepts a position as the marketing director for a non-profit organization that works on environmental conservation. Her work is now challenging and less glamorous, but for the first time, she feels a profound sense of purpose. Her professional skills are now in direct service of her deepest intention, to heal, not to harm. In the second scenario, due to family obligations, she cannot afford to leave her job, So, she chooses to practice an internal form of right livelihood. She resolves to be a force for good within her company. She uses her influence to advocate for more truthful and less manipulative advertising practices. She volunteers to lead her company's pro bono program, offering their marketing expertise to small charities. She becomes a mentor to junior colleagues, teaching them not just how to be effective, but how to be ethical. She transforms her role from one of a simple employee to one of an internal activist, working to infuse her corporate environment with greater integrity and consciousness. Both of these paths are valid and powerful expressions of right livelihood. One is a change of form, the other, a change of heart. Both are about closing the gap between what we believe and how we live. Right livelihood completes the great training in ethical conduct. With our speech, our actions, and our work now brought into alignment with the path, we have constructed a life of profound integrity. We have built a stable and solid foundation, a life that is no longer at war with itself. This ethical purity creates a mind that is free from remorse, guilt, and anxiety, and such a mind is calm, clear, and ready for the deeper, more subtle work of meditation. However, to maintain this ethical foundation amidst the inevitable challenges and temptations of life, and to progress further on the path, requires a specific kind of spiritual stamina. We must learn how to skillfully direct our mental energy. This brings us to the threshold of the next great training, the training in mental discipline, samadhi, which begins with the vital and dynamic practice of right effort. Having laid the firm, ethical foundation of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, we now cross a threshold. We move from the outer expressions of our practice into the inner laboratory of the mind itself. This is the beginning of the great training in mental discipline, or samadhi, the section of the path dedicated to the direct cultivation of a calm, clear, and powerful awareness. A house built on a solid foundation is secure, but it is still empty. The work of furnishing the inner world now begins, and the very first requirement for this work is energy. Not a frantic, stressful energy, but a balanced, joyful, and sustainable energy. This is the sixth factor of the path, right effort, or sama vayama. It is the engine that propels our raft across the river, the steady diligence that transforms passive understanding into active, living wisdom. The word effort in English can sometimes conjure images of struggle, of gritting one's teeth and forcing a result. This is not the meaning of sama vayama. The path is not a battle to be won through brute force. A more accurate feeling for right effort is wise, persistent endeavor. A beautiful analogy is found in the story of Sona, a monk who was practicing with such extreme, tense effort that he made no progress and thought of giving up. The Buddha, knowing his mind, asked him, "Sona, before you became a monk, were you not skilled at playing the lute?" Sona replied that he was. "And what happened?" the Buddha asked. "If the strings of your lute were too tight, they would snap," Sona said. "And what if they were too loose? They would not make a sound." In the same way, Sona, the Buddha concluded, effort that is too strenuous leads to restlessness, and effort that is too slack leads to laziness. Tune your effort as you would tune your lute, with a balance that is both relaxed and resonant. Right effort is this beautifully tuned quality of mind, a joyful energy that engages with the path without causing stress or burnout. Perhaps the most helpful way to understand this practice is to think of yourself as the gardener of your own mind. Your mind is a garden. Thoughts, emotions, and mental states are the plants that grow there. Some of these are wholesome flowers of kindness, compassion, and clarity. Others are unwholesome invasive weeds of greed, anger, and confusion. Right effort is the complete four-part skill set of a wise and diligent gardener, the constant, gentle work of tending this inner landscape so that what is beautiful and beneficial can flourish. The first of these four great efforts is the effort to prevent the arising of unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the gardener's first task, preventative care. It is the wisdom of building a good fence and guarding the gates to keep out pests and wind-blown weed seeds. In our practice, this means guarding the sense doors. Every moment, our mind is contacted by sights, sounds, smells, tastes, physical sensations, and thoughts. These are the gates through which the world enters our consciousness. Without mindfulness, our reaction is automatic. If the contact is pleasant, the seed of greed is sown. If it is unpleasant, the seed of aversion is sown. Guarding the gates is the effort to apply mindfulness right at this point of contact. For example, you are scrolling online and see a post that is designed to be outrageous and inflammatory. The unguarded mind immediately reacts with anger. The weed of ill will has been planted and is already growing. The wise gardener, however, sees the seed coming. They recognize this is a potential trigger for anger. With that recognition, they can exercise wise restraint. They can choose not to engage, to close the tab, to turn their attention to their breath. They have prevented the unwholesome state of anger from ever taking root. This is not suppression, it is wisdom. It is the art of not planting the seeds of our own future suffering. The second great effort is the effort to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Even the most diligent gardener finds that weeds sometimes get through the fence. Likewise, despite our best efforts, we will inevitably find our minds filled with anger, jealousy, anxiety, or obsessive desire. This is not a sign of failure. It is simply the nature of an untrained mind. The crucial question is, what do we do next? The unskillful approach is either to ignore the weed, letting it grow and spread its seeds, or to fight it violently, which often just strengthens its roots. The skillful gardener does neither. They mindfully approach the weed and gently, but firmly, pull it out from its root. In our practice, this means turning toward the difficult emotion with mindful acceptance. Instead of being lost in anger, we recognize, anger is present in me right now. We don't judge it or try to violently suppress it. We investigate it. Where do I feel this anger in my body? What thoughts are fueling it? We can then apply a skillful antidote. If we are angry, we can intentionally bring to mind a feeling of loving kindness. If we are consumed by desire, we can reflect on the impermanent, unsatisfactory nature of the object of our craving. This is the effort of abandoning, of uprooting the weeds of our mind, not with violence, but with the gentle, persistent light of our own awareness. The third great effort is the effort to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. A garden is not defined merely by the absence of weeds. Its true beauty lies in the flowers, fruits, and vegetables that are intentionally planted and nurtured there. In the same way, the path is not just about getting rid of the bad, it is about actively, joyfully cultivating the good. This is the effort to plant the seeds of kindness, compassion, generosity, gratitude, and calm in a mind where they may not currently be present. We cannot simply command ourselves, be kind now. Emotions don't work that way, but we can, with wise effort, create the conditions that are conducive to their growth. We can read a book that inspires compassion. We can listen to a Dharma talk that clarifies the mind. We can consciously choose to spend time with wise and kind friends who uplift us. We can perform a small, intentional act of generosity, like donating to a cause we care about or offering help to a neighbor. We can sit down and deliberately reflect on all the things in our life for which we are grateful. Each of these actions is like preparing the soil and planting a wholesome seed. We do the work, and then we trust that, in its own time, a beautiful quality will begin to sprout. The fourth and final great effort is the effort to maintain and develop wholesome states that have already arisen. Once a beautiful flower has begun to bloom in our garden, the wise gardener doesn't just walk away. They water it, make sure it gets sunlight, and protect it from harm so it can grow strong and produce more seeds. In our practice, this means learning to recognize and savor the wholesome moments. When a feeling of genuine peace, joy, or kindness arises, our habit is often to ignore it or to quickly move on to the next problem. This practice encourages us to do the opposite. When you feel a moment of calm, give it your full attention. Notice it, appreciate it. When you feel a surge of genuine affection for someone, let yourself rest in that feeling for a few moments. By giving our mindful attention to these positive states, we are strengthening them. We are watering the flowers. In the language of neuroscience, we are reinforcing the neural pathways associated with well-being, making it more likely that these states will become our new default, our new habit. This is the steady, nurturing effort of the turtle in the famous parable, who, with slow but unceasing persistence, makes its way surely to the vast ocean. These four great efforts, working together, form the complete and dynamic art of mental cultivation. They are the engine of our practice, the joyful diligence that prevents the bad, abandons the bad, arouses the good, and maintains the good. It is the conscious and skillful management of our inner energy, steering it away from what causes suffering and toward what creates freedom. But to be a truly skillful gardener, one crucial element is still needed. You must be able to clearly see what is in your garden. You must be able to tell the difference between an invasive weed and a precious flower. To apply effort wisely, you must first have clarity about what is actually happening in your mind from moment to moment. The wise energy of right effort requires a guiding intelligence, a clear, non-judgmental awareness. This indispensable quality is the seventh factor of the path, the very heart of meditation practice, right mindfulness. We have arrived at the very heart of the path, the seventh factor, which infuses all the others with life and intelligence. Having built our ethical foundation through right action and right livelihood, and having generated the wise, balanced energy of right effort, we now come to the practice that directs that energy. This is the art and science of right mindfulness, or samasati. If right effort is the diligent gardener tending the mind, right mindfulness is the clear, bright, unwavering light that allows the gardener to see everything with perfect clarity, to distinguish the nourishing flower from the invasive weed, to see the first signs of disease, to know exactly what is needed in each moment. It is the master tool, the anchor, the calm center in the storm of our experience. Without mindfulness, our efforts are blind. With it, our path becomes a journey of profound discovery. So what is this quality of mindfulness? At its essence, it is a particular way of paying attention. A popular and useful definition describes it in 4 parts: paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack this. Paying attention signifies that mindfulness is not a passive, trance-like state. It is an active and intentional directing of our awareness. On purpose means we are choosing where to place our attention, rather than letting it be hijacked by every passing thought, emotion, or external distraction. In the present moment points to the radical truth that the now is the only time we ever truly have. The past is a memory, the future a fantasy. Life is only ever happening right here. Mindfulness is the practice of showing up for it. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, non-judgmentally. This is the revolutionary aspect of the practice. It is the willingness to observe our experience, the pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral, without immediately layering on our habitual judgments, stories, and reactions. It is the cultivation of a gentle, spacious, and allowing attitude toward ourselves. Mindfulness is not about liking or disliking our experience. It is about knowing it, clearly and intimately, just as it is. To make this vast practice accessible, the Buddha systematically organized it into what are known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is a complete and progressive training that guides our awareness from the most solid and tangible aspects of our experience to the most subtle. It is a journey that begins with the very ground beneath our feet, the body. The first foundation is mindfulness of the body, or kaya nupassana. We begin here because the body is our most reliable anchor to the present moment. While our mind can be lost in elaborate fantasies about yesterday or tomorrow, our body is always, undeniably, here and now. The most fundamental practice for cultivating mindfulness of the body is mindfulness of breathing, or anapanasati. The instruction is beautifully simple. You find a comfortable, dignified posture. You close your eyes gently, and you bring your awareness to the natural, unforced rhythm of your breath. You simply feel the sensation of the air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs, and the sensation of it leaving again. You don't try to control the breath or change it. You allow it to be your anchor. Inevitably, the mind will wander. It will be pulled away by a thought, a sound, a plan, a memory. This is not a failure. This is the moment where the practice truly happens. When you notice the mind has wandered, you gently acknowledge where it went, without any scolding or frustration, and then you softly, kindly, escort your attention back to the physical sensation of the breath. This act of returning, over and over again, is the bicep curl for the muscle of attention. With each gentle return, you are cultivating patience, kindness, and focus. This practice can be extended to mindfulness of the whole body, walking, standing, sitting, lying down. It is feeling the soles of your feet on the floor as you walk to the kitchen. It is feeling the warmth of the water on your hands as you wash the dishes. It is inhabiting your body fully, rather than using it as a mindless vehicle to carry your head from one meeting to the next. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings, or Vedananupasana. Having grounded our awareness in the body, we turn to a more subtle layer of experience. The Pali word Vedana does not refer to complex emotions like love or rage, but to the raw, immediate feeling tone that accompanies every single moment of experience. Every sight, every sound, every thought, every sensation comes with an immediate pre-verbal tag: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This feeling tone is the critical link in the chain reaction of suffering. Our deep unconscious habit is to instantly grasp at what is pleasant, to instantly push away what is unpleasant, and to be bored and checked out with what is neutral. This automatic grasping and pushing is the engine of tanha, of craving in action. The practice of mindfulness of feelings is to insert a moment of conscious awareness into this process. We learn to simply notice the feeling tone without being swept away by the reaction. When a pleasant feeling arises, like the taste of a sweet fruit, we can note pleasant and enjoy it without immediately giving rise to the thought, "I need more of this." When an unpleasant sensation arises, like the ache in your back during meditation, you can simply note unpleasant and observe it with curiosity rather than immediately reacting with frustration and resistance. In this pause, this buffer zone between feeling and reaction, lies our freedom. We are no longer slaves to our fleeting likes and dislikes. The third foundation is mindfulness of the mind, or Cittanupassana. Here, we turn the lens of awareness onto the mind itself, observing its passing states and moods. Ordinarily, we are completely identified with our mental states. When anger is present, we say, "I am angry." We become the anger. When sadness is present, we say, "I am sad." We become the sadness. This practice teaches us to disidentify, to see mental states as temporary weather patterns passing through the vast sky of our awareness. The practice is to simply recognize and name the quality of mind that is present in any given moment. Without judgment, we note, the mind is feeling greedy, or the mind is restless, or the mind is calm and concentrated. Notice the language. The mind is, not I am. This simple shift in language reflects a profound shift in perspective. We begin to see that we are not our thoughts or our moods. We are the awareness that knows these states are present. This is a direct, experiential insight into the truth of no self anatta, and its effect is deeply liberating. When a dark mood like anxiety or depression arises, we no longer need to take it so personally. We don't have to believe its story. We can greet it with a kind and spacious awareness, recognizing it as an impersonal, impermanent event in the mind. It loses its power over us when we stop identifying with it. The fourth and most comprehensive foundation is mindfulness of Dhammas, or Dhammanupassana. This is where we use the Buddha's teachings themselves as a framework for observing our reality. Dhammas in this context refers to the fundamental principles or categories of experience. This practice involves seeing our moment-to-moment life through the clarifying lens of these truths. For instance, one practice is to be mindful of the 5 hindrances, the 5 primary obstacles to mental clarity. When we sit to meditate, we can learn to recognize, sensual desire is present now, or ill will is present, or sloth and torpor are making the mind heavy, or restlessness and worry are present, or skeptical doubt is present. By simply naming and recognizing these hindrances, we are no longer caught by them. We see them for what they are, temporary visitors, conditioned mental states that obscure the mind's natural clarity. We can also use this foundation to observe our experience as the interplay of the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, seeing directly how the self is just a process, not a solid entity. In its most profound application, we can observe the 4 noble truths in action within us. In a moment of difficulty, we can mindfully note this feeling of frustration. This is dukkha. The craving for it to be different. This is tanha, its cause. The possibility of letting go of this craving, that is nirodha. And this very act of mindful, non-judgmental observation is the path, magga. This is the culmination of the practice, where we are no longer just learning the teachings, but are seeing them come alive in every moment of our experience. Right mindfulness is therefore a complete path of cultivation in itself. It is the steady, compassionate presence that allows us to inhabit our bodies, to unhook ourselves from our reactive patterns, to disidentify from our passing moods, and to see the fundamental truths of existence playing out in our own hearts and minds. It is the quality that makes the wise energy of right effort effective. It is the light that guides our way. But mindfulness is not the final destination. Its purpose is to prepare the mind, to gather and unify its scattered energies. As we sustain this gentle, unwavering attention, a natural and beautiful process unfolds. The mind, once as turbulent as a choppy sea, begins to grow calm. Its frantic energy settles. The scattered rays of our attention begin to coalesce into a single, steady, and powerful beam of light. This natural culmination of a mind trained in ethics, effort, and mindfulness brings us to the eighth and final factor of the path, the profound state of clarity and peace known as right concentration. We have journeyed through the 7 preceding factors of the path, from the wisdom of right view to the vital heart of right mindfulness. Each step has been a process of purification, alignment, and training. We have built an ethical foundation to steady our lives, generated the balanced energy of right effort to propel us forward, and cultivated the clear, non-judgmental awareness of right mindfulness to guide our way. Now we arrive at the culmination of this training, the 8th and final factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. This is the fruit that ripens on the tree of practice. It is the profound state of inner stillness and unification, known as right concentration, or Samma Samadhi. If mindfulness is the act of gathering the scattered rays of our attention, concentration is the act of focusing them into a single, steady, and powerfully coherent beam of light. Right concentration is not something we can force. It is the natural and beautiful result of a mind that has been nurtured by the other 7 factors. When our lives are grounded in ethical conduct, our minds are free from the agitation of guilt and remorse. When we apply right effort, we have the joyful energy needed to sustain our practice. When we cultivate right mindfulness, we gently shepherd our attention back from distraction, time and time again. As we do this, the mind, which is ordinarily as turbulent and choppy as a storm-tossed sea, gradually begins to settle. The waves of discursive thought become smaller. The undercurrents of restlessness begin to cease. A deep, abiding calm emerges. This is the beginning of samadhi. A classic and powerful metaphor for this process is that of a lake filled with muddy water. Our ordinary mind is like this muddy lake. The mud is stirred up by the winds of sensory desire, ill will, restlessness, and doubt, the 5 hindrances. In this state, the water is opaque. It cannot reflect the sky, the moon, or the surrounding trees with any clarity. We cannot see to the bottom. This is our normal, confused state of being. The practice of mindfulness is like protecting the lake from the wind. We guard our senses and gently let go of the hindrances. The practice of concentration is the process of allowing the mud to settle. As the mind grows still, the sediment of habitual thought patterns and emotional turmoil slowly sinks to the bottom. The water becomes progressively more clear, calm, and still. A mind in a state of right concentration is like this settled lake, perfectly tranquil, transparent, and capable of reflecting the nature of reality with flawless, pristine accuracy. It is vital to distinguish right concentration from the ordinary, everyday concentration we are all familiar with. We can be highly concentrated while playing a video game, performing surgery, or reading a complex book. But this worldly concentration can be tense, narrow, and can even be used for unwholesome ends. A sniper, for example, has an exceptionally high degree of concentration, but it is not right concentration. Samma Samadhi is right because it is supported and informed by all the preceding path factors. It is guided by the wisdom of right view. It is infused with the warmth of right intention, the desire for peace and liberation. It arises from the stability of an ethical life. Therefore, unlike tense, worldly focus, right concentration is relaxed, spacious, and filled with a sense of ease and well-being. It is not a state of strain, but a state of profound rest. As the mind settles into deeper states of concentration through sustained meditative practice, it can pass through a series of progressively more subtle and blissful states of absorption, known as the jhanas. These are not the goal of the path in themselves, but they are profound experiences of mental purity and peace that give the practitioner a taste of the freedom of nirvana and equip the mind with extraordinary power. In the first jhana, as the hindrances fully recede, a profound sense of rapture and happiness, piti, sukha, arises, born of this seclusion. The mind feels uplifted, joyful, and suffused with a vibrant, energetic bliss, all while remaining focused on its meditation object. As the concentration deepens further into the second jhana, the initial mental activity of thinking and examining fades away. The joy and happiness intensify, born now not of seclusion, but of pure, unified concentration. A deep confidence and inner tranquility emerge. The mind is like a deep spring-fed lake, with cool waters welling up from within, needing no external source to fill it. In the third jhana, the more energetic and exciting quality of rapture, piti, fades, leaving behind a more serene, all-pervading happiness and contentment, sukha. A powerful, mindful equanimity, upekkha, becomes the dominant quality. The bliss is less like an explosion of joy and more like being saturated in a profound sense of peaceful well-being. Finally, in the fourth jhana, even this subtle sense of happiness is relinquished. What remains is a state of pure, boundless equanimity, beyond pleasure and pain, beyond happiness and sorrow. The mind is utterly still, silent, and luminous, like a vast, calm ocean under the light of a full moon, without a single ripple. The breath itself may seem to cease, and the mind is imbued with an unshakable stability and a radiant clarity. One might ask, what is the purpose of cultivating such states? Are they not just a form of escapism, a pleasant holiday from the troubles of the world? While these states are profoundly healing and restful, a true spa for the mind, that is not their ultimate purpose. Their ultimate purpose is to forge an instrument of discovery. The true work of liberation is the work of insight, of seeing things as they truly are. A scattered, agitated, and distracted mind is a poor tool for this work. It is like trying to see the fine details of a microbe through a microscope whose lens is smeared with mud. It is like trying to perform delicate brain surgery with a trembling hand. The mind that has been trained in right concentration and emerges from a state like the fourth jhana is the opposite of this. It is an instrument of unparalleled quality. It is exceptionally calm, yet keenly alert. It is stable, yet flexible. It is bright, powerful, and exquisitely sensitive. This is the mind that is fit for the work of insight, or vipassana. This is the state where the two great wings of the practice serenity, samatha, and insight, vipassana, come together. The calm, concentrated mind is then directed back towards experience itself. With this new, powerful lens, it can see beyond the surface appearances and penetrate to the fundamental nature of reality. It can see the truth of impermanence, anicca, not as a philosophical concept, but as the constant, high-speed vibration of every sensation and thought. It can feel the truth of unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, in the very fabric of conditioned experience. And most profoundly, it can see through the illusion of a solid, separate self, directly experiencing the truth of no self, anatta. The bliss of concentration is the reward that encourages the practice, but the insight it enables is what cuts the roots of suffering forever. Right concentration is the beautiful and powerful culmination of the Eightfold Path. It is the gathering of all our efforts into a single, unified state of being. Ethics provides the stable ground. Effort provides the persistent energy. Mindfulness provides the guiding awareness, and concentration provides the penetrating, unifying power. The path is a perfectly integrated system, and here, in Samadhi, its full power is realized. We now possess the ultimate instrument for liberation, a mind that is calm, clear, unified, and sharp. The training phase is complete. Now, the work of discovery begins. With this powerful tool in hand, we are ready to turn the laser beam of our attention back upon the world and upon ourselves, to investigate the very nature of existence with a clarity that can see through all illusion and delusion. Our next step is to direct this refined awareness to an unwavering examination of the first great mark of all conditioned phenomena, the universal, inescapable truth of impermanence. We have now arrived at the great turning point of the path. With the mind collected and unified through the practice of right concentration, we have forged an instrument of unparalleled clarity and power. The training phase of the journey is complete. The great work of discovery is about to begin. The mind, now like a perfectly polished lens, is ready to be turned back upon existence itself, not to analyze it with mere intellect, but to penetrate its deepest nature with direct, intuitive wisdom. This investigation begins with the exploration of the three marks of existence, or Tilakanatha, three universal signatures that are stamped upon every single conditioned phenomenon in the universe, from a distant galaxy to a fleeting thought. These three marks are impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, dukkha, and no self, anatta. We begin with the first and most accessible of these great gateways to liberation, the profound and universal truth of impermanence. Anicca is the Pali word for impermanence, transience, inconstancy. It points to the fundamental reality that everything that comes into being is subject to change and will eventually pass away. Nothing is static. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in a state of constant flux. This is not a dark or pessimistic philosophy. It is a simple, observable law of nature, as neutral and impersonal as the law of gravity. We do not suffer because of gravity, but we would certainly suffer if we stubbornly resisted it by jumping off a cliff. In the same way, we do not suffer because of impermanence itself. We suffer because our minds are conditioned to resist it. We crave security in a world that is inherently insecure. We seek to build permanent homes on shifting sands. We grasp at fleeting moments, trying to freeze the unceasing flow of the river of life. This friction between our deep-seated desire for permanence and the absolute reality of impermanence is the primary cause of our anxiety, our grief, and our disappointment. To see anicca clearly, therefore, is to begin the process of unraveling our own suffering at its very root. Our investigation of impermanence begins in the outer world, the macrocosm, where its truth is most evident. We look at the natural world and see that it is an endless dance of arising and passing away. We see the sun rise, arc across the sky, and set, only to rise again. We see the seasons turn, from the new life of spring to the vibrant fullness of summer, the decay of autumn, and the deep stillness of winter. We see the tides ebb and flow, the clouds form and dissolve, the great mountains slowly being worn down by wind and rain over millennia. The life of a flower, from seed to sprout to blossom to withered stalk, is a complete teaching on impermanence in itself. Even the stars, which appear to us as timeless diamonds on velvet, are in fact colossal furnaces burning through their fuel, destined to one day collapse and die. The entire cosmos is a symphony of change. We see this same truth in the world of human creation. Great empires that once seemed invincible now lie in ruins. Their stone monuments are testament to the fact that nothing built by human hands can last forever. The cities we live in are in a constant state of transformation, with old buildings being torn down and new ones rising in their place. The technology that was revolutionary a decade ago is now obsolete, gathering dust in a drawer. Our own lives are the most poignant example of this cosmic law. We are born, we grow through childhood and adolescence, we reach the peak of our physical strength in young adulthood, and then we begin the slow, inevitable process of aging. Our health fluctuates, our abilities change, and we are all moving toward the same inescapable conclusion: sickness, old age, and death. To contemplate this is not to be morbid, it is to be a realist. It is to see with sober eyes the fundamental condition of our existence. While seeing impermanence in the outer world is a crucial first step, the truly transformative practice is to turn the sharpened lens of the concentrated mind inward, to observe the ceaseless flux of our own moment-to-moment experience. We begin with the body. We sit and feel the constant, rhythmic flow of the breath, a river of air entering and leaving the body, never the same from one moment to the next. We feel the steady, percussive beat of our own heart, a drum that has been beating without pause since before we were born, but which will one day fall silent. We can sense the subtle processes of digestion, the replacement of billions of cells each day, the electrical impulses firing along our nerves. The body we identify as me is not a solid, static object at all. It is a dynamic, ever-changing river of processes, a colony of interdependent systems in constant motion. There is nothing in it we can point to and say, "This is the permanent me." From the body, we turn our awareness to the flow of our feelings and sensations. With mindful attention, we can see that no feeling is permanent. A pleasant sensation, like the warmth of the sun on our skin, arises, lingers for a time, and then fades away. An unpleasant feeling, like a sudden pang of anxiety or a physical pain, appears, perhaps intensifies, and then, if we allow it to be, it too changes and dissolves. The mind's habit is to cling desperately to the pleasant and to violently resist the unpleasant. But the wisdom of Anika teaches us a different way. When we know, from our own direct observation, that all feelings are like passing clouds, we don't have to take them so seriously. We can learn to savor the pleasant without clinging, and to endure the unpleasant with patience, knowing that this too shall pass. Even more subtle and profound is the observation of the impermanence of our thoughts. Our minds produce a ceaseless stream of thoughts, memories, plans, judgments, and fantasies. We tend to believe these thoughts are solid and real, especially the ones about ourselves. We grasp onto a negative thought, like I am a failure, and treat it as a permanent truth, a solid identity. But the practice of mindfulness reveals our thoughts for what they are: ephemeral, insubstantial events in consciousness. They are like bubbles rising to the surface of a pond. They appear for a moment, shimmer, and then pop, gone without a trace. When we see this directly, we realize we don't have to believe everything we think. We can learn to watch the stream of thought flow by without being swept away by it. This is the beginning of freedom from the tyranny of our own minds. This relentless change is the nature of our reality. Our resistance to it is the engine of our suffering. There is a classic Taoist story that perfectly illustrates the wisdom of accepting this flow. An old farmer lived in a village with his son. His most prized possession was a beautiful horse. One day, the horse ran away. The villagers came to console him, saying, "Oh, what terrible luck." The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a herd of wild horses. The villagers came to celebrate, exclaiming, "What wonderful luck." The farmer just shrugged and said, "Maybe." The next day, his son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off and broke his leg. The villagers came to offer their sympathy. "How awful! What a piece of bad luck," they said. The farmer replied, "Maybe." A week later, the army came through the village, conscripting all the able-bodied young men for a war from which few would return. Because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was spared. The villagers were amazed. "You were right all along. What incredible good luck." The farmer, looking out at his fields, simply said, "Maybe." This farmer embodied the wisdom of Anika. He understood that life is an unpredictable flow of events, and that our labels of good luck and bad luck are fleeting judgments based on a limited perspective. He did not cling to fortune or despair at misfortune, because he knew that things would inevitably change. This is not a state of passive resignation, but one of deep, abiding peace and resilience. When we truly accept impermanence, we can engage with life more fully and freely. We can love people more deeply, knowing our time with them is precious and not to be taken for granted. We can weather the storms of loss and failure with greater grace, knowing that no condition is permanent. And here lies the great, hidden gift of impermanence. While on the surface it may seem like a difficult or even depressing truth, Anika is also the foundation of all hope. It is the very thing that makes life, growth, and liberation possible. If things were permanent, a static universe would be a dead universe. A wound could never heal. A mistake could never be corrected. A broken heart could never mend. An unskillful habit could never be changed. We would be frozen forever in one state. It is because of impermanence that we can learn, grow, and transform. The sadness you feel today is not permanent. The confusion you feel is not permanent. Your suffering itself is not a permanent fixture of your being. The path to awakening is a path of change, and Anika is the very law that makes that journey possible. It is the engine of our freedom. To see impermanence, then, is to see the world with sober, realistic, and ultimately compassionate eyes. We let go of our fantasy of a solid, stable, predictable world and learn to dance with the beautiful, messy, and unpredictable flow of life as it is. As we rest in this understanding, observing the constant arising and passing away of all our internal and external experiences, a deeper and even more profound question naturally begins to form in the quiet of the concentrated mind. If everything I observe me body, my feelings, my thoughts is a ceaseless, flowing river with not a single constant drop to be found, then who or what is this I that is watching the flow? If everything is changing, where is the permanent, unchanging self that I have always believed myself to be? This deep, penetrating inquiry into the nature of the observer leads us directly to the next great mark of existence, the liberating and radical truth of no self, or anatta. We have stood on the riverbank of our own experience and watched the ceaseless flow of impermanence, Anika. We have seen that our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, and the world around us are in a state of constant, unrelenting flux. This clear seeing, born of a concentrated mind, inevitably gives rise to a question that strikes at the very heart of our identity. If everything is changing, if every component of my experience is a fleeting, transient event, then who is the one experiencing it? Where is the permanent, unchanging I at the center of this whirlwind? This inquiry leads us to the second great mark of existence, the most challenging, counterintuitive, and profoundly liberating teaching of the Buddha, the truth of no self, or anatta. Let us be clear from the outset. The teaching of anatta does not mean that you do not exist. It is not a doctrine of nihilism or annihilation. You are here, conscious, reading these words. The teaching of no self is not concerned with whether you exist, but with how you exist. Our deeply ingrained, common sense intuition tells us that inside our mind and body, there resides a core, an essence, a me. We imagine a permanent, independent CEO, sitting in a control room in our head, thinking our thoughts, feeling our feelings, and making our decisions. We believe ourselves to be a nuna, static, separate thing. The doctrine of anatta reveals that this is a powerful and persistent illusion. It suggests that we are not a noun, but a verb. We are not a thing, but a process. We are not a separate statue, but a flowing, dynamic river of interconnected events. To understand this, the Buddha invited us to become investigators, to deconstruct our own experience, and see if we can find this supposed solid self. He analyzed the entirety of a person's being into 5 categories, known as the 5 aggregates or khandhas. These are the components that we mistake for a self. The first is form, or rupa. This is our physical body, the flesh, bones, blood, and breath. We have already seen in our contemplation of impermanence that the body is in a constant state of flux. It is aging, changing, and composed of elements that are borrowed from the earth. Is this transient, decaying body the permanent, real you? The Buddha's guidance leads us to see that it is not. It is simply a physical process we are experiencing. The second aggregate is feeling, or vedana. These are the raw, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feeling tones that arise with every experience. As we have seen, feelings are incredibly fleeting. A pleasant feeling arises and is gone. An unpleasant one appears and it too vanishes. Can this flicker of pleasure or pain, which lasts only a few moments, be the essential you? To claim so would be like claiming a single, passing cloud is the entire sky. Clearly, we are not our feelings. The third aggregate is perception, or sanya. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It is the process that sees a collection of colors and shapes and labels it tree, or hears a sound and labels it car horn. Our perceptions are conditioned by our past experiences, our culture, and our language. They are not a pure reflection of reality, and they are constantly changing. Is this conditioned, labeling function the real you? Again, the investigation reveals it is just another impersonal mental process. The fourth aggregate is perhaps the most complex. Mental formations, or sankhara. This is a broad category that includes all of our habits, biases, opinions, beliefs, memories, desires, and volitional urges. This is the part of us we often most strongly identify with. We think I am my beliefs, or I am my personality, but when we look closely, we see that these too are conditioned and impermanent. Our opinions change, our beliefs evolve, and our habits can be transformed through practice. These mental formations are not a solid core. They are just deeply ingrained patterns of thought and reaction. They are not a thing, but a habit of doing. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness, or vijnana. This is the raw faculty of awareness, itself seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, thinking consciousness. We might be tempted to think, aha, this awareness must be the real me, the soul. But the Buddha asks us to look even closer. We see that consciousness is not a continuous, monolithic entity. It arises dependently. Seeing consciousness arises only when there is an I and a visible object. It is not a constant thing, but a flickering event that is entirely dependent on conditions. It is not a permanent spotlight, but a series of momentary sparks. After methodically examining each of these 5 components of our being, we are led to a startling conclusion. We cannot find a permanent, independent, solid self anywhere. The self is a convenient name we give to the temporary coalition of these 5 ever-changing, interdependent processes. This is perfectly illustrated in a famous ancient text, The Questions of King Milinda. The Greek king Milinda, seeking to understand this difficult teaching, challenges the Buddhist sage Nagasena. The king arrives in a grand chariot. Nagasena, after greeting him, asks, "Your Majesty, did you arrive on foot or in a vehicle?" The king replies that he came in a chariot. Nagasena then begins his inquiry. "Your Majesty, what is this chariot? Is the pole the chariot?" "No, venerable sir," replies the king. "Is the axle the chariot? Are the wheels, the frame, the reins, the goader, any of these the chariot?" To each question, the king answers no. Nagasena then asks, "Then is the chariot all of these parts combined?" The king again says no. "Then is this chariot something separate and outside of all these parts?" "No, venerable sir." At this, Nagasena triumphantly declares, "Then, your Majesty, for all your searching, you cannot find the chariot. Chariot is just a sound, a name, a convenient designation for this collection of parts." The king, being wise, grasps the point immediately. In the exact same way, he realizes his own name, Milinda, is just a convenient designation for the temporary combination of his body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. There is no essential Milinda-ness to be found anywhere, independent of these changing parts. Why is this insight so profoundly liberating? Because most, if not all, of our human suffering is born from the desperate, lifelong project of defending, protecting, and gratifying this imaginary solid self. When we believe we have a precious, permanent self to protect, we live in constant fear. We fear criticism because it feels like an attack on our very being. We fear failure because it diminishes our sense of self-worth. We fear old age and sickness because they are an assault on the body we identify with. And we are terrified of death because we believe it is the annihilation of this me. The insight into anatta is the key that unlocks this prison of ego. When we see directly that the self is a fluid process, not a fragile object, the entire basis for this anxiety collapses. We take things less personally. We become more resilient, more flexible, and less afraid. Greed, which is the desire to accumulate things for me, begins to wither. Ill will, which is the desire to protect me by attacking you, loses its fuel. The hard, sharp boundary between self and other begins to soften, allowing our natural compassion and sense of connection to all life to blossom. The teaching of no self is not a loss. It is a letting go of a burden we were never meant to carry. It is the end of the exhausting, impossible project of trying to be a separate, solid thing in a universe that is flowing and interconnected. We discover that our true nature is not a noun, but a verb. We are not a thing, but a happening. We are not a statue, but a dance. And as this insight deepens, as the illusion of our separateness begins to dissolve, a new and profound question emerges. If I am not a separate, independent entity, then how do I exist? What is the relationship between this process that I call myself and all the other processes of the universe? This radical shift in perspective from an isolated self to an interconnected process opens the door to the final great teaching of wisdom, the beautiful and intricate truth of dependent origination, the profound interconnectedness of all things. We have journeyed into the very heart of our own being, taking apart the construct of the self and finding with the clear light of awareness that no solid, separate, independent entity resides there. We have seen that the self we cling to is a dynamic process, a flowing river of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. This profound insight into no self, anatta, shatters our old, isolating view of the world, but it does not leave us in a void. Instead, it opens the door to an even more beautiful and expansive reality. If we are not separate, then what are we? How do we exist? The Buddha's answer to this is the teaching of dependent origination, or paticca samuppada. This is the positive expression of the truth of no self. It is the discovery that we exist not as isolated islands, but as interconnected nodes in a vast, intricate, and magnificent web of life. The core principle of dependent origination can be stated with beautiful simplicity. This being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This ceasing, to be, that ceases. From the cessation of this, that ceases. This means that nothing, absolutely nothing, exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon other factors. Everything is conditioned by everything else. The modern Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, coined a beautiful word to capture this reality: inter-being. To be is to inter-be. We can see this truth clearly by looking at any object. Consider a simple sheet of paper. When we look at the paper, we may see it as a single, separate thing. But with the eyes of interdependence, we see much more. We see the tree from which the paper was made. We see the sunlight, the rain, and the soil that nourished the tree. We see the logger who cut the tree, and we see the logger's parents who gave him life. We see the factory worker who made the paper, the food she ate for lunch, and the farmer who grew the food. We see the truck driver who delivered the paper, the roads he drove on, and the people who built the roads. The paper contains the cloud, the sunshine, the forest, and the entire economy. If we were to remove any one of these elements, if we were to remove the sun, for example, the sheet of paper could not exist. Its existence is entirely dependent on the existence of everything else. It interis with the entire cosmos. Now, let us turn this same lens of inquiry upon ourselves. We think of ourselves as a separate me, but can this me exist without the air we breathe? The air connects us to the trees, the plankton, and the great oceans. Can this me exist without the food we eat? The food connects us to the earth, the sun, the rain, and legions of farmers and workers. Can this me exist without our parents, and their parents, and all the ancestors who came before them? Can this me exist without the language we think in, the culture that shaped our ideas, the teachers who educated us? When we look deeply, we see that the boundary we draw around our skin is an arbitrary illusion. We are not a discrete entity. We are a nexus, a temporary gathering point, a unique expression of the same universal forces that created the paper, the stars, and the galaxies. The entire universe has conspired, through an infinitely complex web of causes and conditions, to give rise to the experience of you in this very moment. In the rich imagery of the Mahayana tradition, this profound truth is illustrated by the metaphor of Indra's net. Imagine a vast cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. It has no beginning and no end. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, glittering, multifaceted jewel. Each jewel is perfectly clear and polished. The most wondrous quality of this net is that if you look closely into the surface of any one jewel, you will see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire infinite net. Not only that, but each reflection in that single jewel also contains the reflection of every other jewel, and so on, ad infinitum. Each jewel represents a single being, a single event, a single atom. Each one exists only in its relationship to all the others. Its very substance is nothing more than the reflection of all the others. If you were to remove one jewel, all the other jewels would be subtly different, as they would no longer have that one jewel to reflect. At the same time, each individual jewel contains within itself the whole of reality. The one contains the all, and the all is present in the one. This is the truth of our existence. We are each a unique, precious jewel in this cosmic net, and yet, our entire being is a reflection of the whole. We are both individual and universal, both finite and infinite. What happens when we begin to live with this understanding, not just as a beautiful idea, but as a felt reality? the emotional and ethical implications are revolutionary. It becomes the unshakable foundation for genuine compassion. In our old, separate view of the world, compassion is often a top-down, slightly condescending affair. We feel pity for that poor person over there, who is separate from us. But from the perspective of interdependence, the very distinction between self and other dissolves. When we see another person suffering, we no longer see a stranger. We see a part of our own net that is in distress. Their suffering is our suffering, because we are inextricably connected. Compassion then arises not as a moral duty, but as a spontaneous, natural response. As automatic as your left hand rushing to soothe a burn on your right hand. The hands are different, but they are part of one body. In the same way, all beings are part of one body of existence. This understanding also gives rise to a profound sense of responsibility. If every jewel reflects every other jewel, then our every action, every word, and even every thought sends a vibration, a ripple, throughout the entire net. A single act of kindness, a word of encouragement, or a thought of goodwill makes every jewel in the universe shimmer just a little more brightly. Conversely, an act of cruelty, a hateful word, or a selfish thought sends a tremor of darkness that subtly dims the entire web. This means that we are never insignificant. We are powerful co-creators of our shared reality in every moment. Our lives are imbued with a sacred purpose, to tend to our own jewel, to polish it with mindfulness and kindness, knowing that in doing so, we are contributing to the beauty and radiance of the entire cosmos. The illusion of the separate self is the root cause of the world's great sicknesses: fear, alienation, tribalism, racism, war, and the exploitation of our natural environment. We have acted as if we were separate from each other and separate from the planet that sustains us, and the result is immense suffering. The teaching of dependent origination is the ultimate cure for this sickness of separation. It is the realization that we are not isolated fragments in a hostile universe, but integral and precious parts of a magnificent, interconnected whole. We have now journeyed through the great wisdom teachings of the path. We have seen that all things are impermanent, that there is no solid self, and that all life exists in a state of profound interdependence. This clear seeing is not meant to remain a cold intellectual concept. It is meant to warm the heart and transform it. The natural, inevitable response to truly understanding our interconnectedness is the desire to actively nurture and express states of boundless love, compassion, and joy for all beings, who are, in truth, inseparable from ourselves. This brings us to the next stage of our journey, the cultivation of the beautiful and sublime states of heart known as the Four Immeasurables, or the Brahma Viharas, beginning with the foundational practice of loving kindness, or metta. The journey through wisdom has led us to a profound and transformative vantage point. We have seen through direct investigation that all things are impermanent, that there is no solid, separate self, and that all of life exists in a state of profound, intricate interdependence. We have arrived at the intellectual understanding that the separation between self and other is an illusion. But this understanding, as profound as it is, can remain cold and abstract if it is not allowed to permeate the heart. The path of awakening is a marriage of wisdom, panya, and compassion, karuna. The clear seeing of the mind must be balanced by the warmth and openness of the heart. Now, we begin the great training of the heart itself, the cultivation of four sublime states of being known as the Brahma Viharas, or the Four Immeasurables. These are the divine abodes, the boundless qualities of an awakened mind: loving, kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. We begin with the foundation, the radiant sun from which all other heart practices are illuminated, the practice of loving kindness, or metta. Metta is a Pali word that is often translated as loving kindness, but it also carries the meaning of goodwill, friendliness, and benevolence. It is crucial to understand what metta is not. It is not the sentimental, conditional, and often possessive love of romance. It is not the affection we feel for someone because they please us or meet our needs. It is not a sappy or weak emotion. Metta is a steady, unconditional, and powerful intention. It is the simple, yet radical, wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and well. It is like the sun, which shines its warmth down on all things impartially, on the beautiful flower and the muddy ditch, on the saint and the thief, on our friends and on our enemies. The practice of metta is the practice of becoming this sun in our own heart, a source of unwavering warmth and safety for ourselves and for the world. It is the direct and heartfelt response to the wisdom of interdependence. If we are all truly connected, then wishing for your happiness is, in the deepest sense, wishing for my own. The journey of cultivating metta begins in the most intimate and often the most difficult place, with ourselves. In Western culture, we are often taught to be relentlessly self-critical. We believe it is humble or virtuous to focus on our flaws, to push ourselves harder, to treat ourselves with a harshness we would never dream of inflicting upon a friend. The idea of offering ourselves unconditional loving kindness can feel awkward, selfish, or even narcissistic. But the Buddha was unequivocal. We cannot offer to others what we do not possess ourselves. You cannot draw water from a dry well. Your capacity to genuinely wish for the happiness of others is directly limited by your capacity to wish for your own. Therefore, learning to be a true friend to yourself is the most essential, foundational step in opening your heart to the world. Let us begin this practice together. Find a posture that is both comfortable and dignified. Allow your eyes to close gently. Take a few deep breaths, and with each exhalation, feel yourself letting go of any tension in your body, in your jaw, your shoulders, your belly. For a moment, bring to mind an image of yourself. Perhaps you can picture yourself as a small, innocent child, deserving of love and protection. Or perhaps you can simply get a felt sense of your own being, sitting here, breathing, alive. Now, we will silently, gently, offer ourselves the traditional phrases of metta. Let the words be soft, like a gentle whisper in your own heart. Begin by offering the wish, may I be safe. This is a wish for safety from all external dangers, but more importantly, from the inner dangers of our own anger, fear, and despair. It is a wish to be protected, to find sanctuary. Silently repeat the phrase, letting its meaning settle in your heart. May I be safe. Next, offer the wish, may I be healthy. This is a wish for the well-being of your body, for strength and vitality. But it is also a wish for a healthy mind, a mind free from the fever of anxiety and the weight of sorrow. May I be healthy. Now, offer the wish, may I be happy. This is not a wish for fleeting pleasure or constant excitement. It is a wish for a deep, abiding happiness and contentment, a sense of inner well-being that is not dependent on external conditions. It is the simple wish to be at peace. May I be happy. Finally, offer the wish, may I live with ease. This is a wish for a life free from struggle. It is a wish that the challenges of life may be met with grace, that your path may be smooth, and that you may move through the world with a sense of lightness and freedom. May I live with ease. Continue to repeat these phrases gently. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I live with ease. Do not worry if you don't feel a great surge of emotion. That is not the point. The point is the gentle, persistent intention. You are planting seeds. Some days the ground of your heart will feel fertile and receptive. Other days it will feel hard and dry. It does not matter. Your only job is to continue planting the seeds with patience and kindness. If feelings of unworthiness or self-criticism arise, see if you can meet even these difficult thoughts with the same quality of metta. They too are a part of your experience, deserving of a gentle, allowing awareness. Once we have spent time establishing a basis of loving kindness for ourselves, we can begin to expand the circle of our goodwill. The next step is to choose a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom it is very easy to feel love and appreciation. Bring an image of this person to your mind. See them smiling, happy, and well. Now, turn the phrases of metta toward them, offering them the same wishes you offered yourself. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. Feel the natural warmth and affection in your heart as you offer these wishes. Let your heart delight in the thought of this cherished being finding true happiness. Rest here for a while, allowing the feeling of metta to flow freely and effortlessly. Next, we expand the circle further to a neutral person. This is someone you see regularly, but for whom you have no strong feelings of like or dislike. Perhaps the person who checks out your groceries, a colleague you don't know well, or someone you pass on your daily walk. We often move through our lives surrounded by such people, seeing them as two-dimensional backdrops to our own story. This practice challenges our indifference. Bring this person to mind. Remind yourself that, just like you, this person has a life, with their own hopes, fears, and a deep desire to be happy. Then, with a sense of shared humanity, extend the phrases to them. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. In doing this, we are breaking down the artificial walls of our indifference and recognizing the humanity in everyone we meet. Now we come to the most challenging and perhaps the most transformative stage of the practice, offering metta to a difficult person. It is wise to begin with someone who is only mildly irritating, not the person who has caused you the deepest harm. The purpose is to train the heart, not to overwhelm it. Bring this person to mind and acknowledge any feelings of anger, hurt, or resentment that may arise. It is here that we must remember what metta is. It is not about condoning their harmful actions. It is not about forcing forgiveness or pretending that what happened was okay. It is a pragmatic and powerful act of self-liberation. It is the recognition that holding on to hatred is a poison that harms you far more than it harms them. With this understanding, you do your best to offer them the phrases of metta. May you be safe. May you be happy. If this feels impossible, you can modify the wish. To the best of my ability, I wish you well, or even more simply, may your suffering cease. The very act of trying to offer goodwill begins to dissolve the chains of resentment in your own heart. If it becomes too difficult, simply return your attention to yourself or your loved one. Recharge the feeling of metta, and then try again when you feel ready. This is the alchemy that transforms the poison of hatred into the nectar of peace. Finally, we let the circle become boundless. We bring to mind all beings simultaneously: yourself, our loved ones, the neutral people, the difficult people. We extend the feeling of metta outward in all directions, to all beings in this room, in this city, in this country, to all beings on this planet, human and non-human, large and small, to all beings in all realms of existence, seen and unseen. We hold the entire web of life in our heart and offer the boundless wish. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be happy. May all beings live with ease. In this moment, the heart transcends all boundaries and limitations, abiding in a state of immeasurable, radiant goodwill. The power of metta is not merely a pleasant feeling, it is a shield and a light. In a famous story, the Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, conspired to assassinate him by getting a ferocious bull elephant named Nalagiri drunk on palm wine and unleashing him on the narrow lane where the Buddha was walking. As the enraged elephant charged, screaming and destroying everything in its path, the Buddha's followers panicked. But the Buddha remained calm. He did not run or raise a weapon. He simply stood still, and from his heart he radiated a powerful, unwavering wave of pure metta toward the terrified and furious animal. As the wave of loving kindness washed over the elephant, its rage dissolved. It slowed its charge, its eyes softened, and it walked peacefully to the Buddha, knelt down, and allowed the Buddha to gently stroke its forehead. This story illustrates the true strength of metta. It is a force capable of disarming the most fearsome violence, both externally and, more importantly, within our own hearts. It is our ultimate protection against the charging elephants of our own anger, fear, and hatred. Metta, then, is the training of the heart to respond to the world with friendliness and unconditional goodwill. It is the first of the 4 divine bodhis, the foundational practice for cultivating a truly open and compassionate heart. It is the wish for all beings to find happiness. But as our heart softens and our awareness expands, we will inevitably encounter beings who are not happy, who are in the midst of active pain and distress. What is the heart's response when it meets with the concrete reality of suffering? This question leads us from the gentle, radiant warmth of loving kindness to the deep, resonant trembling of the heart that is known as compassion, or karuna. With hearts softened by the practice of loving kindness, metta, we have cultivated the sincere and boundless wish for all beings to be happy. We have become like the sun, shining our warmth impartially on the entire world. But as our awareness expands, we cannot help but notice that the world is filled not only with the potential for happiness, but also with the stark reality of pain. We see loneliness, sickness, poverty, grief, and conflict. The practice of the open heart does not ask us to turn away from this difficult truth. Instead, it asks us to turn toward it. What is the heart's response when it comes face to face with suffering? The answer is the second of the four immeasurables, the second divine abode, compassion or karuna. The Pali word karuna is often translated as compassion, but its root meaning is to tremble or to quiver. It is the trembling of the heart when it is touched by the pain of another. It is a deep, visceral sensitivity to suffering, both our own and that of others. But karuna is more than just feeling. It is a vibrant, engaged, and courageous state of heart. It has two essential components. The first is the empathic ability to feel with another. The second, which is crucially important, is the strong, active desire for that being to be free from their suffering. Without this second component, empathy alone can be crushing. It can lead to burnout, despair, and a sense of being overwhelmed by the world's pain. Karuna, however, is an empowering state. It is the marriage of a tender heart that feels, and a strong heart that wishes to heal. It is the motivation for all wise and benevolent action. It is vital to distinguish true compassion from its near enemy, pity. Pity is a feeling that looks down from above. It creates a separation between the one who pities and the one who is pitied. When we feel pity, there is a subtle sense of, "Oh, you poor thing. I am so glad I am not in your position." Pity reinforces the ego and the illusion of separateness. Karuna, on the other hand, arises from the insight of interdependence. It is a feeling between equals. It recognizes the shared vulnerability of all beings. When we feel compassion, we look at another's suffering and think, "I know this feeling. This pain is part of our shared human experience. This could just as easily be me." Pity says, "You're suffering." Compassion says, "This suffering." It dissolves the boundary between self and other, and in that shared space, a genuine desire to help is born. Furthermore, true compassion must always be guided by wisdom, panya. Without wisdom, our well-intentioned desire to help can sometimes cause more harm than good. This is sometimes called idiot compassion. It is the compassion of a parent who, wanting to spare their child any discomfort, gives in to every demand, and ends up raising a child who is unable to cope with the world. It is the compassion that gives money to a drug addict on the street, directly fueling the very addiction that is causing their suffering. Wise compassion understands that sometimes true help involves saying no. Sometimes it involves setting firm boundaries. Sometimes it means allowing people to face the natural consequences of their actions so they can learn. Wise compassion is not about simply removing immediate pain. It is about supporting the long-term conditions for well-being and freedom from suffering. Like metta, karuna can be formally cultivated through meditation. The practice follows a similar structure, but with a different focus. We begin by bringing to mind a person we care for who is currently experiencing some form of suffering, illness, grief, or difficulty. We allow ourselves to gently touch their pain with our awareness. We don't need to wallow in it or become distraught. We simply acknowledge its reality. Then, instead of just feeling sad for them, we actively cultivate the strong, warm wish. May you be free from this suffering. May you be free from this pain. May you find peace. We repeat this phrase, allowing the feeling of heartfelt compassion to grow. It is a feeling of strength and solidarity, not of weakness or despair. From there, we turn this compassionate awareness toward ourselves. We all have our own suffering, our own wounds, our own struggles. We often treat our own pain with impatience, judgment, or denial. The practice of self-compassion is to offer ourselves the same tenderness we would offer a dear friend. We acknowledge our own pain without judgment and extend the wish inward. May I be free from this suffering. May I be healed. May I find peace. Then, we gradually extend the circle outward to a neutral person, acknowledging their hidden struggles, and then, most profoundly, to a difficult person. We look at the person who may have harmed us, and instead of focusing on our own anger, we try to see the suffering that fuels their unskillful actions. We recognize that people who cause pain are almost always in pain themselves. With this insight, we can cultivate the wish. May you be free from the suffering that causes you to inflict suffering on others. This is a practice of immense healing, for it frees us from the burden of carrying their pain in the form of our own resentment. Finally, we extend this boundless compassion to all beings everywhere, holding the suffering of the entire world in a heart that trembles with a courageous and unwavering wish for all to be free. The archetype of this boundless, active compassion is the great Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, known in East Asia as Kuan Yin or Kannon. A Bodhisattva is a being who, on the verge of attaining final nirvana, chooses to remain in the world out of immense compassion, vowing not to enter final peace until all other beings are free from suffering. The myth of Avalokiteshvara tells that upon hearing the ceaseless cries of pain from all corners of the universe, their heart was so moved with compassion that their head exploded into 11 pieces and their 2 arms shattered into 1,000. They were utterly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the world's suffering. The Buddhas, seeing this magnificent and selfless motivation, gave Avalokiteshvara a new form, one capable of responding to this need. They gave them 11 heads to perceive suffering in all directions, and 1,000 hands to reach out and offer help. And in the palm of each of the 1,000 hands, they placed an eye, symbolizing that this compassionate action is always guided by the clear seeing of wisdom. This powerful image is not a god to be worshipped, but a mirror of our own deepest potential. It teaches us 3 essential things about true compassion. First, it requires us to be willing to have our hearts broken open by the pain of the world. It is not a detached or sterile feeling. Second, compassion is not passive, it is active. It has 1,000 hands, always looking for a way to serve, to help, to alleviate pain. Third, and most importantly, it is always guided by wisdom, the eye in the palm of the hand. It is not blind sentiment, but clear-seeing, effective action. To cultivate karuna is to aspire to become Avalokiteshvara in our own small way, to develop a heart that is brave enough to feel the world's pain and wise enough to respond skillfully. Karuna is the courageous heart of the enlightened mind. It is the second of the 4 divine bodhis, building upon the gentle warmth of metta and giving it direction and purpose in the face of pain. We have now cultivated the wish for all beings to be happy and the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. But what is the heart's response when we see our wish come true? What happens when we encounter the joy, success, and good fortune of others? Our ordinary, untrained mind often reacts with a pang of jealousy, comparison, or a sense of lack in ourselves. The path now invites us to train the heart in a rare and beautiful quality, the perfect antidote to envy. This brings us to the 3rd divine abode, the practice of rejoicing in the happiness of others, sympathetic joy, or mudita. We have opened our hearts with the gentle, radiant warmth of loving kindness, metta, wishing for all beings to be happy. We have learned to meet suffering with the tender, trembling courage of compassion, karuna, wishing for all beings to be free from pain. Now, the path invites us to train our hearts in a quality that is perhaps the most challenging in our competitive, comparison-driven world. We are asked to cultivate the 3rd of the 4 divine bodhis, the rare and beautiful jewel known as sympathetic joy, or mudita. This is the practice of rejoicing in the happiness, success, and good fortune of others. If compassion is the heart's ability to share in sorrow, sympathetic joy is its ability to share in happiness. It is the genuine, selfless delight we feel when we see others prosper and flourish. In a world that constantly encourages us to measure our worth against the achievements of others, mudita is a radical act of rebellion. Our untrained mind, conditioned by a lifetime of social comparison, has a deeply ingrained habit. When we hear of another's success, a friend gets a promotion, a neighbor wins an award, a family member finds a happy relationship or immediate, gut-level reaction is often not one of pure joy. Instead, we feel a subtle, painful pang. It is the sting of envy, the whisper of jealousy. A voice in our head asks, why them? When is it my turn? Their success somehow highlights my own lack. This state of envy, or isa in Pali, is a profound source of self-inflicted suffering. It springs from a scarcity mindset, the mistaken belief that happiness is a limited resource and that another's gain is our loss. Envy contracts the heart, fills it with poison, and chains us to a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. The practice of mudita, then, is the direct antidote to this poison. It is the conscious cultivation of a mindset of abundance. It is the realization that joy is not a finite commodity. The happiness of another person does not diminish the world's supply of happiness. It adds to it. If we can only feel joy when good things happen to us, our opportunities for happiness will be few and far between. But if we can learn to feel genuine joy in the good fortune of every person we meet, our opportunities for happiness become limitless. Our heart becomes a vast field capable of celebrating a million different successes, a million different moments of joy. We liberate ourselves from the cramped, painful prison of the ego and learn to delight in the flourishing of the entire web of life. It is important to distinguish true mudita from its near enemy. The near enemy is an unwholesome state that masquerades as a wholesome one. The near enemy of mudita is a kind of vicarious exuberance or excitement. It is getting swept up in the glamour of another's success in a way that is still self-referential. For example, feeling excited because our friend has become famous and we can now enjoy the perks of their fame, or the pride a parent feels in a child's success, which is often more about the parent's own ego gratification than a simple selfless delight in the child's own happiness. True mudita is quieter, more selfless. It is the simple, unadorned appreciation of another's well-being for their own sake, without any thought of, what's in it for me? Like the other heart practices, we can cultivate mudita through a dedicated formal meditation. We begin, perhaps surprisingly, with ourselves. Before we can genuinely rejoice for others, we must learn to appreciate our own good fortune without arrogance. Take a moment to reflect on something good in your own life. It need not be a grand achievement. It could be your health, a loving friendship, a skill you possess, or simply the gift of this present moment. Allow yourself to feel a quiet, appreciative joy for this good fortune. You can use a phrase like, "I am happy that I have this in my life. May this well-being continue." This practice helps us recognize the presence of happiness without immediately feeding the ego. Next, we bring to mind a dear friend or someone we love and respect. Think of a specific success, joy, or piece of good fortune they have recently experienced. Perhaps they have achieved a long sought-after goal, or are simply enjoying a period of peace and contentment. Instead of just acknowledging it as a fact, actively cultivate a feeling of joy for them. Visualize their happy face, feel the warmth of their success. Silently offer them the phrases, "I am so happy for you. I rejoice in your good fortune. May your happiness and success continue and grow." Let your heart be filled with their joy. Notice how this act of selfless celebration feels expansive, warm, and uplifting. It is a shared happiness that doubles its power. The next stage is to extend this feeling to a neutral person. Bring to mind that acquaintance for whom you feel neither like nor dislike. Imagine something wonderful happening to them. Perhaps they get a promotion at work, or their child recovers from an illness, or they simply win a small prize. See if you can generate a feeling of genuine gladness for them. How wonderful for you. I am happy that you have this happiness. This practice is a powerful way to dissolve our indifference to the people around us. It fosters a sense of community and shared humanity, recognizing that everyone is trying their best to find happiness and that their success is a victory for the whole human family. The most advanced and potent stage of the practice is to attempt to feel sympathetic joy for a difficult person, a rival, or someone we actively envy. This is extraordinarily difficult, and it must be approached with great patience and self-compassion. The goal is not to pretend we are not hurt or to ignore past difficulties. The goal is to begin to break the painful, self-centered habit of envy. Bring this person to mind. Acknowledge the difficult feelings that arise. Then, see if you can find one single aspect of their life that is genuinely fortunate, something you could, in principle, be happy about for any human being. Perhaps they have good health, or a loving family, or a particular talent. Then, as an act of profound spiritual training, try to offer a flicker of mudita. As a fellow being, you also wish to be happy. I will try to rejoice in the happiness that you have. Even the smallest moment of success in this practice is a monumental victory. It is the moment you choose freedom over the self-imposed torment of envy. Consider a simple modern story. Two friends are aspiring musicians, working hard for their big break. One day, one of them, Maria, gets a major record deal. Her friend, Sarah, hears the news, and her first, instantaneous, private reaction is a sharp, painful pang in her gut. It is the voice of envy. Why her? We started at the same time. Am I not as good? This is the untrained mind, immediately caught in the prison of comparison. But Sarah has been practicing mudita. She recognizes that painful contraction of envy for what it is, a source of her own suffering. She takes a breath. She remembers her practice. She intentionally shifts her focus away from her own feeling of lack and onto her friend. She pictures Maria's face, radiant with the joy of achieving her dream. She walks over to Maria, gives her a huge hug, and says with complete heartfelt sincerity, "I am so incredibly happy for you. This is amazing. You have worked so hard for this." In that moment of sharing her friend's joy, Sarah's own painful envy dissolves. It is replaced by the expansive, warm, and connective feeling of mudita. She realizes that Maria's success does not diminish her. It does not take anything away from her own path. It simply adds more beauty and music to a world they both share. Her friend's happiness has become her happiness. Mudita is the heart's celebration of life. It is the practice that liberates us from the narrow, painful confines of our own ego and allows us to partake in the infinite joys of the universe. It completes the active, outward-facing qualities of the heart. We now have a heart trained in loving kindness for all beings, a heart that trembles with compassion at their suffering, and a heart that rejoices in their happiness. This heart is warm, open, and deeply connected. However, to navigate the wild and unpredictable swings of life, the great joys that we celebrate with mudita, and the deep sorrows that we meet with Karanatha's responsive heart, needs a foundation of profound stability. It needs an unshakable center that can hold all of life's experiences without being knocked off balance. This brings us to the fourth and culminating divine abode, the crown jewel of the heart practices, the serene, unwavering peace of equanimity, or upekkha. We have journeyed through the radiant warmth of loving kindness, metta, the tender trembling of compassion, karuna, and the selfless celebration of sympathetic joy, mudita. Our hearts have been trained to open to the world, to wish for its happiness, to feel its sorrow, and to rejoice in its triumphs. This is a heart that is beautifully alive, sensitive, and engaged. Yet, a heart that is only open and responsive can be vulnerable. It can be tossed about on the turbulent waves of life's intense joys and profound sorrows. To be a true sanctuary of peace, this vibrant, open heart requires a foundation of unshakable stability, a profound and spacious calm that can hold all of life's experiences without being overwhelmed. This is the fourth and culminating divine abode, the crown jewel of the heart practices. It is the serene, balanced, and unwavering peace of equanimity, or upekkha. The Pali word upekkha is often translated as equanimity, but it also carries connotations of balance, impartiality, and seeing with patient, non-reactive awareness. The Latin roots of our English word are equally revealing: aequus, meaning even, and animus, meaning mind. Equanimity is the practice of cultivating an even mind, a balanced heart. The classic image for upekkha is that of a great, majestic mountain. The mountain remains stable and unmoved, whether it is bathed in the gentle warmth of the spring sun, lashed by the violent winds of a summer thunderstorm, scorched by autumn heat, or buried in the heavy snows of winter. It experiences all the changing seasons, all the weather, without being shaken, without losing its essential, grounded stability. To cultivate upekkha is to develop this mountain-like quality in our own mind, to be able to experience the full spectrum of life's pleasures and pains, its gains and losses, with a quiet, steady, and unbreakable peace. It is absolutely crucial to understand what equanimity is not. Its most dangerous counterfeit, its near enemy, is indifference. From the outside, they can look similar. Both may appear calm and unflustered in the face of crisis, but internally, they are polar opposites. Indifference is a state of withdrawal, of emotional shutdown. It is a defense mechanism born of fear and aversion. The heart of indifference says, "I don't want to feel this, it's too painful, so I am closing myself off. I don't care." It is a cold, sterile state that creates distance. True equanimity, upekkha, is not cold. It is radiantly warm. It is not a closing down, but a radical opening up. The heart of equanimity is so vast, so open, and so filled with courage that it can hold all of life's experiences without needing to shut down. It says, "I care deeply about this outcome, but I accept that I cannot control it. I will feel the joy or the pain fully, but I will not be thrown off balance by it." Consider the difference between an indifferent surgeon and an equanimous one. The indifferent surgeon doesn't truly care if the patient lives or dies. Their emotional distance is a form of callousness. The equanimous surgeon, on the other hand, cares immensely. They bring all their skill, all their focus, and all their compassion to the operation. They do everything in their power to bring about a good outcome, but they have the wisdom to accept that, ultimately, they do not have complete control. If the surgery is a success, they feel a quiet satisfaction, but are not inflated with ego. If the surgery fails, they feel the sadness of the loss, but are not crushed by despair. This stability allows them to learn from the experience and move on to help the next patient with a clear mind and a steady hand. Indifference is a form of death. Equanimity is a form of profound, courageous, and engaged life. This stable, balanced mind is not something we can simply will into existence. It is a quality that arises naturally from the deep roots of wisdom. The first of these roots is a mature understanding of karma, the law of intentional action and its results. True equanimity develops when we recognize that every being is the owner of their own actions and the heir of their own karmic destiny. We can love them, we can guide them, we can offer them our help and our wisdom, but we cannot walk their path for them. We cannot make their choices for them, nor can we shield them from the consequences of those choices. Releasing the ego's immense burden of trying to control the lives of others is a profound source of peace. We learn to offer our help freely and then to step back, respecting the autonomy and the unique journey of the other person. This is the loving, spacious heart of an equanimous parent who guides their child, but allows them to make their own mistakes and learn their own lessons. The second, and even deeper, root of equanimity is the direct experiential insight into impermanence, anicca. When we have seen, with the clarity of a concentrated mind, that all things are in a constant state of flux, our desperate need to cling to particular outcomes begins to dissolve. This is the wisdom that allows us to face the 8 worldly winds, the unavoidable polarities of human existence. These 8 winds are constantly blowing in our lives: pleasure and its opposite, pain, gain and its opposite, loss, praise and its opposite, blame and fame and its opposite, disrepute. The untrained mind is like a leaf caught in these winds, tossed about uncontrollably. When things are going well, when we experience pleasure, gain, praise, and fame, we are lifted up into a state of excitement and attachment. When the winds change and we experience pain, loss, blame, and disrepute, we are plunged into despair and aversion. Our happiness is completely at the mercy of external conditions. The mind of equanimity, grounded in the wisdom of impermanence, is the mountain. It knows that pleasure is fleeting, so it is not attached. It knows that pain is temporary, so it is not resistant. It knows that praise and fame are just sounds and opinions that will vanish, so it is not inflated by them. It knows that blame and disrepute are also impermanent, so it is not crushed by them. It allows all 8 winds to blow past without being shaken from its peaceful, centered foundation. With this foundation of wisdom, upekkha becomes the great balancing and perfecting factor for the other 3 divine abodes. It is the calm hub of the wheel that allows the spokes of love, compassion, and joy to function effectively. Loving kindness, metta, without the balance of equanimity, can easily become a form of grasping attachment. We love someone, and our happiness becomes dependent on their presence and their well-being. When they suffer, our love turns into anxious grief. Equanimity allows our metta to be pure and unconditional, a freely offered gift rather than a transaction based on our own needs. Compassion, karuna, without the spaciousness of equanimity, can be overwhelming. When we open our hearts to the immense suffering of the world, without the stability of upekkha, we risk being drowned in a sea of pain. This leads to what is often called compassion, fatigue, or burnout. Equanimity is the container that allows us to bear witness to tremendous suffering without being destroyed by it. It is the wisdom that allows Avalokiteshvara's 1,000 hands to keep working, providing the strength and resilience to serve over the long haul. Sympathetic joy, mudita, without the balance of equanimity, can become a kind of restless excitement. We get swept up in the energy of another's success, and this can easily flip back into envy if our own fortunes should suddenly decline while theirs continue to rise. Equanimity allows our joy for others to be steady, calm, and genuine, free from the turbulent undercurrents of comparison and self-interest. Upekkha, then, is the culmination of the training of the heart. It is the ultimate expression of spiritual maturity. It is a peace born not of ignorance or withdrawal, but of profound wisdom and boundless love. It is the peace that the world cannot give, and that the world cannot take away, because it is not dependent on the world being any particular way. It is the cool, tranquil heart that has realized its own true nature. Having journeyed through the trainings in wisdom, in ethical conduct, and in mental discipline, and having now cultivated the 4 immeasurable states of the heart, we have assembled a complete and powerful toolkit for navigating the human experience. We have the map, the compass, the well-built raft, and the skill to sail it. The final question of our journey is the most practical one of all. Now that we have all these tools, how do we use them not just as isolated practices, but as a fully integrated way of being? How do we carry the peace of the mountain into the clamor of the marketplace? This brings us to our final exploration, the art of weaving the path into the fabric of our daily lives. We have now traveled the full circumference of the Noble Eightfold Path. We began with the clarifying light of wisdom, learning to see the world and ourselves with the clear eyes of right view, and to align our hearts with the noble motivations of right intention. We then built a solid foundation in the world through the training in ethical conduct, purifying our speech, our actions, and the way we earn our living. Finally, we turned inward, undertaking the great training of the mind itself, cultivating the balanced energy of right effort, the unwavering presence of right mindfulness, and the profound stillness of right concentration. We have explored the fundamental nature of reality, its impermanence, its essencelessness, and its profound interconnectedness. And we have opened our hearts to the boundless states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. We have, in essence, assembled a complete and perfect toolkit for the journey of liberation. But now we face the most important question of all. What do we do with these tools? Is this path simply an elegant philosophy to be admired, a set of meditative experiences to be collected and stored away like souvenirs? The answer is a clear and resounding no. The map is not the territory. The recipe is not the meal. The true practice does not end when we get up from the meditation cushion. It is precisely in that moment that it truly begins. The goal of this entire journey is to dissolve the artificial boundary between our practice and our life. It is to learn how to bring the peace, clarity, and compassion we cultivate in moments of stillness into the dynamic, messy, and often chaotic flow of our everyday existence. The world, with all its challenges and its beauty, becomes our monastery. Every moment becomes an opportunity to practice. Consider your relationships with others. This is one of the most fertile fields for practice. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to practice right speech. Are my words true? Are they kind? Are they necessary? Am I listening deeply to the other person, or just waiting for my turn to talk? When your partner or your child is suffering, you can consciously practice karuna, offering them the gift of your compassionate presence, rather than just trying to fix their problem. When a friend shares good news, you have the chance to notice the arising of either envy or genuine mudita, and to consciously choose to cultivate the latter, rejoicing in their happiness. When you find yourself in a disagreement, you can practice upekkha, holding your own view with less rigidity and respecting the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. Consider your time at work. This is no longer a domain separate from your spiritual life. It is the direct application of right livelihood. But more than that, every interaction is a chance to practice. When a stressful deadline looms, you can apply right effort, tending to the anxiety in your mind without letting it overwhelm you. When a difficult colleague provokes you, you can practice guarding the sense doors, noticing the seed of anger before it sprouts. When you complete a task, you can do so with right mindfulness, bringing your full attention to the work at hand, finding a sense of quiet satisfaction in a job well done. Your work becomes a training ground for patience, integrity, and skillful interaction. Even the most mundane, in-between moments of life are transformed from wasted time into golden opportunities. Washing the dishes is no longer a chore to be rushed through, but a chance to practice mindfulness of the body feeling, the warmth of the water, seeing the iridescence of the soap bubbles, hearing the sound of the plates. Waiting in line at the grocery store is no longer a source of frustration, but a chance to practice mindfulness of breathing and to offer silent wishes of metta to the people around you. Your daily commute becomes a period for contemplation. The path teaches us that there are no ordinary moments. Every moment is extraordinary, pregnant with the possibility of waking up. This is the meaning of the Zen master's famous instruction: when you walk, just walk. When you eat, just eat. It is the practice of bringing your whole self to your whole life, moment by moment by moment. And what about when we fail? What about the times when we forget everything we have learned, when we get lost in anger, when we speak harshly, when we act out of greed, when we spend an entire day lost in distraction? This is perhaps the most important practice of all. The goal of the path is not to become a flawless, perfect human being who never makes a mistake. Such a being does not exist. The goal is to change our relationship with our own imperfection. The true measure of our practice is not whether we fall down, but how we get back up. When the untrained mind stumbles, its reaction is to add a second arrow of suffering. We get angry, and then we get angry at ourselves for being angry. We feel anxious, and then we feel anxious about being anxious. We berate ourselves. I'm a terrible meditator. I'll never get this. I'm a failure. This self-judgment is a cruel and useless form of violence. The path teaches a kinder, wiser way. When you stumble, when you recognize you have been unskillful, the first practice is self-compassion, karuna for yourself. You meet your own failure with the same tenderness you would offer a child who has fallen and scraped their knee. You acknowledge the pain without judgment. Then, you apply right view. Ah, I see. My harsh words came from a place of fear and a bruised ego. I see the cause and the effect. With this clarity, you can apply right effort, making a gentle, sincere resolve to do things differently next time. In this way, our failures are not tragedies. They become our greatest teachers. They illuminate the areas where we still need to work, and they give us the chance to practice the profound art of forgiveness and self-acceptance. The great Zen teacher, Shunryu Suzuki, perfectly captured this paradox when he told his students, "Each of you is perfect, just as you are, and you could use a little improvement." This is the heart of the journey. It is the radical acceptance of ourselves in this moment, complete with all our flaws and imperfections, combined with the joyful, ongoing commitment to growth and transformation. The path is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more fully, wisely, and compassionately who we have been all along. Ultimately, we come to realize that the path is the destination. There is no far-off future moment of enlightenment that we are striving to reach. Liberation is not a prize we win at the end of the race. Liberation is a quality of presence that we can touch in any moment that we are truly awake. Every moment of mindfulness is a moment of liberation. Every act of generosity is a moment of liberation. Every time we let go of resentment, every time we meet our own pain with compassion, we are touching nirvana. The point of the journey is not to arrive. The point is the journey itself, the slow, patient, and beautiful process of walking, step by step, back to the peace and clarity of our own true nature. Having now integrated the practice into the fabric of our being, let us take one final step back to survey the entire arc of our journey, from the first painful cry of the heart to the quiet wisdom of an awakened mind, and to distill the essential message of this transformative path. Our journey began in a place of quiet desperation, with a question whispered into the noise of a world that felt overwhelming and unkind. We began with the cry of the heart that echoes through all of human experience. Why me? It was a question born from a feeling of isolated suffering, a sense that we had been unfairly singled out by hardship, by stress, by a world that refused to conform to our desires. We stood on the shore of our own pain, feeling lost and alone. From that shore, we embarked upon a great journey. We followed an ancient path that did not offer easy answers or a magical escape, but instead offered something far more valuable, a light with which to see. We learned to call our universal ache by its true name, dukkha, realizing that this dissatisfaction is not a personal failure, but a fundamental condition of life itself. In seeing our suffering as a shared experience, Its power to isolate us began to dissolve. We then looked deeper, discovering that the root of this ache was not the world outside, but the restless, burning thirst within our own hearts, the clinging and craving of Tana. And then, in the midst of this diagnosis, we were given a profound hope, the truth of Nirodha, the reality that this thirst could be quenched, that these fires of suffering could be extinguished. We were shown that a state of profound peace was possible, and we were given the map to that peace, the Noble Eightfold Path. As we walked this path together, we began to understand the central message of this timeless wisdom. We so often begin a spiritual search, hoping to find the tools to control the world, to rearrange reality so that it will no longer cause us pain. The path of awakening teaches us the opposite. It gives us the tools to train our own minds so that we can meet the world with peace, courage, and compassion, no matter what it brings. Peace, we have discovered, is not the absence of storms in our life. It is the ability to find the calm, unwavering center within the heart of the storm. It is not the building of a fortress to keep out loss and pain, but the wisdom to sail the unpredictable ocean of life with skill, grace, and an open heart. The source of our freedom and our happiness is not, and never has been, out there. It has been waiting patiently for us, right here, within the quiet, luminous nature of our own awareness. This entire journey is, in the end, an invitation. It is not a set of beliefs to be adopted, but a set of practices to be explored. The Buddha's timeless challenge was always e pasi kokom, and see for yourself. The truth of this path is not found in these words, but in your own direct experience. You do not need to wait for a special time or place to begin. You already possess everything you need. The journey begins with a single, conscious breath. It begins with a single moment of choosing kindness over anger, a single act of letting go. The answer to that first painful question, why me, has been transformed. It is no longer a cry of despair. It has become a quiet, dignified, and powerful affirmation. Why me? Because I am a human being with the profound capacity to suffer, and because I am a human being, blessed with the even more profound capacity to awaken.